Hey guys, tonight we're tracing your bare feet across the cold stone floor of a fortress that doesn't know your name. You carry no torch. You carry no map. Just a story. Yours? Maybe. Or maybe you're just another ghost in its telling, so before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I'm doing here, and hey, post your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's listening out there in the dark. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soothing whir, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Section 1. You drag your weary limbs through the haze of a history class so boring it could resurrect the dead, only to have them beg to return to their graves. The teacher drones. The clock slows. You start to wonder, has anyone ever died from sheer boredom? But then, in a crack between seconds, the ceiling opens. Not literally. More like the idea of a ceiling. You're pulled into it like lint into a vacuum. No resistance. No goodbye, you wake up face first in dirt. You're in ancient Mesopotamia. Somewhere around 3100 BCE. The air is dry, and the sun does not play nice. There's a smell, burnt goat. Maybe despair. Hard to tell. The people around you were nothing but rough linen and an expression that says, "We invented civilization but forgot about weekends." You're immediately handed a reed stylus and a chunk of wet clay. No questions asked. No time to stretch. Congratulations, you're now a junior scribe in the palace archive. Your job? Copying tax records about barley shipments. Forever, this is how writing began, not with poetry, not with love letters, but with 5 goats, 3 jars of oil, 1 suspect sack of lentils. No wonder people forgot how to read after the fall of Babylon. It was all spreadsheets in cuneiform. Historical fact, cuneiform, the world's earliest known writing system, was primarily used for accounting and administration, not for literature. Sorry, Shakespeare. Numbers came first. Now, your hands cramp, your back spasms, and every time you sneeze, your clay tablet cracks. You try to ask for a break, but the senior scribe just points to a wall covered in tally marks. Not inspiring tally marks. These are days without a single rebellion. It's been 11,242, you start to carve a tally of your own. Not of peace. But of how many times you've whispered "kill me" under your breath. At night, there are no beds. Just reed mats that poke your dreams into submission. You try to escape through sleep, but even your dreams are bureaucratic. You're sorting clay receipts for a temple goat lottery. You win a goat. The goat bites you, and yet, somehow, they say this was the dawn of civilization. Now let's shift. You blink, and the clay beneath you becomes limestone. You're still on your knees, but now you're chiseling. Your stylus has turned into a chisel, and your tablet into a tomb. Welcome to ancient Egypt, around 1500 BCE. Your new job? Inscribing the Book of the Dead onto your pharaoh's sarcophagus. Yes, this is your promotion. Problem is, your pharaoh believes that if you make a single typo, he'll be devoured by a crocodile-headed demon in the afterlife. So, no pressure. You pause after each word, sweating more than the Nile in July. Every scratch must be perfect. Every Horus must not become a horse. Strange fact, some Egyptian scribes trained by copying insults like. You write like a goose walking on wet clay. Your boss might have been one of them. The tomb is dim. A flickering oil lamp is your only ally. The air tastes of mold and regret. Your eyes blur. You think you see a cobra. It's just a rope. Or is it? You blink again, and it's gone, and just when you think you can't take another minute, the overseer hands you. Mascara? Nope. Crocodile dung. Ancient Egyptians used it as a contraceptive. And sometimes as makeup. Either way, it's now in your toolkit. For reasons you will not explore, academic debate, scholars still argue with. Academic debate, scholars still argue whether ancient contraceptive recipes were symbolic or genuinely intended to prevent pregnancy. Either way, the smell was very real. You try to hide a laugh. A bit of rebellion bubbles up. You draw a tiny doodle of yourself waving on the side of the coffin, just above the god Anubis. No one notices. You live another day. By now, you're exhausted. You long for Wi-Fi. Or deodorant. Or a chair that wasn't made of woven guilt. But instead, you're shuffled forward in time again. No control. No complaints. That's the deal. This time you land in Qin Dynasty China, around 213 BCE. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, is ordering the burning of all books that aren't about him. So that's cool, you're in a uniform. The stiff kind. One that smells like straw and sadness. You're now a book collector. Not the fun kind. Your job is to snatch books from people and throw them into fire pits. You hesitate with one scroll, a beautiful text on herbal medicine. The illustrations are hand-painted. You slip it under your shirt. Just as you're about to step away, you hear a shout. The commander lifts the scroll from your chest. He unrolls it, reads 2 lines, and then eats it. Chews and swallows. To prove it's gone, you're demoted. Not executed. Because the scroll was technically not a philosophical threat. Historical fact, the Qin dynasty's infamous book burning targeted works of philosophy and history that didn't align with the emperor's agenda. Some texts were preserved by hiding them inside walls or memorizing them across generations. Later that night, someone hands you a note under your bowl of rice. It says, "Not all ink burns. Some stay in the bone." You don't sleep. Not because of fear. But because you suddenly realize, you've been in the shadows of history all this time, not shaping it. But copying it, erasing it, saving it in secret, suffering for it, and never, ever getting credit, and yet, you're still here, and so is the story. Section 2, the smell hits you before the smoke does. You cough once, twice, and realize you're now in ancient Athens, somewhere around 430 BCE. Democracy is in bloom, and so is the plague. Congratulations. Your new job. Citizen juror. Unpaid, untrained, and already itchy from whatever's crawling in the wool cloak they gave you, the courtroom is outdoors. Because walls are for tyrants. You squint at a defendant. He's being accused of impiety for saying the moon might not be a goddess but just a rock. That gets you executed here. You're handed a bronze voting disc. One side says guilty, the other not. You can't read either side. No one can. It's all about vibes. The crowd shouts. You flip a coin in your head. The defendant cries. You vote guilty. Historical fact. Athenian juries could have hundreds of members and were chosen by lottery daily. Many trials ended in exile, fines, or death, for offenses like bad theater or questioning the gods. After lunch, some olives, some bread, a lot of judgment, you stroll to the agora. Philosophers yell at each other. One of them, Socrates, asks you what justice means. You say, not dying of plague. He chuckles, calls that a valid starting point, and walks away barefoot. You sit under an olive tree and watch as a group of children play a game involving sharp stones and even sharper insults. One of them throws a fig at your head. Another steals your sandals. You are, briefly, a god of nothing, but then someone grabs your arm. It's your fellow juror. He whispers that tonight there's a secret debate in a wine cellar. Not about law. About history. About whether anything they're doing here will last. You go. You sit on clay tiles. And you listen as one man says, Athens is eternal. Another laughs and says, so was Troy. A third says, history will forget us, unless we make it forget something else. Strange fact, some scholars believe ancient historians fabricated or reworked events to reflect political goals. Herodotus, often called the father of history, was also accused of being the father of lies. You don't know who's right. But you drink deeply from your clay cup and try to memorize the moment, because something tells you, this won't be in the textbooks. You sneeze. When you open your eyes, the sun has shifted and the smells are worse. You're in medieval Baghdad, during the Islamic Golden Age, somewhere around the 9th century. The air is thick with ink and cinnamon. Books, glorious books, fill the streets like weeds. And you? You're a paper washer. Your job is to take old scrolls, wash off the ink with milk and lemon juice, and reuse the parchment. It's oddly satisfying. Except when the text being erased is Greek philosophy, or an ancient medical treatise, or a love poem in Persian, you hesitate over one fragment. It reads, "He who knows the self, knows the world," then milk washes it away. Historical fact, during the Abbasid Caliphate, scholars preserved and translated countless works from Greek, Persian, and Indian traditions. Yet due to cost, many old manuscripts were reused, erasing ancient wisdom in the process. You ask your supervisor why they don't just copy the texts. He says, ink fades. Ideas don't. That night, you sneak back into the scriptorium. You copy the fragment by hand, badly. You hide it inside your sandal. It digs into your foot all day. But it stays with you, as the days pass. You learn something strange. Every book you erase whispers to you. One speaks of music that calms the insane, another of stars that predict plague. One dares to say the earth moves, and you, just a washer of ink, are the only one listening. You tell no one, but the next time you're told to wash a scroll, you pretend. You clean the margins. You leave the words. You hide them behind fake smudges and tea stains. You become a ghost with a mission, save what no one sees. Academic debate. Some historians argue that the loss of classical knowledge in the West wasn't due to destruction but to neglect, while others credit Islamic scholars with preserving that knowledge far longer than we admit. You don't care who gets the credit. You just know that something once erased is harder to revive than a dead city, and you're tired of death. Flash. You're falling again, backwards this time. Landing not on dirt, but velvet. Sort of, you're now in Renaissance Florence, around 1492. The smell of oil paint and genius hangs heavy. You're inside the studio of a master. You should be honored. You are not, you're a pigment boy. The grinder of color. Your hands are stained in ochre and crushed beetles. Your back aches from pounding lapis lazuli into powder. Blue is a luxury. Blue is for the Virgin Mary. Blue costs more than your life. You are told to never speak to the painter. Never meet his eye. But you do, once, and he looks through you like glass. Like a ghost in his vision, still, you see what he doesn't. You see the cracks in the canvas. The way the red bleeds when it's humid. The way a shadow turns green if the light is wrong. You know this not from theory, but from bleeding fingers and long hours spent watching. You notice one corner of a fresco smudged before it dried. You fix it with spit and pigment dust. No one notices. The painting becomes a miracle. You become nothing. Strange fact, some Renaissance apprentices were so skilled they painted significant parts of their master's work, yet received no credit and remained anonymous for centuries. Later, you sneak into the cathedral at night. You light a candle. You stare at the ceiling and whisper, "I was here." No one hears you, but the blue remains. It always does. Then, you're somewhere. Worse. Seville, Spain. 1540, the Inquisition is in full swing. You're not a scribe this time. Or a pigment boy. You're the accused, your crime. Owning a book. Not just any book, a love poem in Arabic, tucked into your boot. It survived 3 empires. It did not survive your neighbor's betrayal. You are tied to a post. The flames haven't started yet. You look up and see the sky is a perfect, ironic blue. You whisper the poem to yourself, one last time. The soldier hears you and scoffs. But a child nearby listens. You see it in their eyes. The rhythm lingers, and just before the fire, the world blurs again, because history is not kind, but it listens, and sometimes, it remembers. Section 3, you land in silence, the kind of silence that buzzes. It's Germany. 1943, the war is loud elsewhere. But here, inside a library basement, it's the quiet that hurts. You're 12. Maybe 13. No one says your real name anymore. Your job is simple: cut pages from books. Not all books. Just the ones written by enemies of the Reich. You sit on a wooden stool with scissors and orders. Cut out the dangerous parts. Leave the rest. Make the lies cleaner. One night, when no one is watching, you glue the pages back together, wrongly. The words make new poems. One reads, books burn quietly in small hands, history hides in folded corners, names do not die when spoken in code. You leave it in the back of a dictionary, the librarian finds it. She does not report you, instead, she hands you a blank notebook. Says nothing. Just give you the gift of paper. Historical fact: during World War II, countless books were banned, censored, or destroyed across Europe. But some librarians, students, and ordinary people risked their lives to hide, rewrite, or preserve fragments of knowledge in secret. Then the war ends, but your story doesn't. You grow up. You forget the poems. You get a job. You file papers. You fall in love once. Maybe twice. You lose people. You keep going, decades pass, now it's the 1990s. You're in your 60s. A child in your apartment building brings you a book they found in a flea market. It's old. Tattered. Smells like ash and oranges. Inside, on page 203, there's a poem. It's yours, the one you wrote as a kid. You laugh. You cry. You don't remember writing it, but you remember the scissors. The silence. The smell of fear and ink. And suddenly, it's like 1,000 versions of you are standing in the same room, holding their breath, and then, letting go, which brings us here, now, this moment, you, me, this voice in your ear. You might think this is just a video. Or a bedtime story, but it's something older than kings, older than alphabets. Older than war, it's memory. Memory is what outlives fire, it's what survives when the scrolls are scraped clean, when the paintings fade, when your name is forgotten but your whisper lingers in the bricks. Memory is what keeps you real, and this is how it begins again, not in a textbook, but in the hush before sleep, so close your eyes. You've walked through centuries, you've copied and erased and rewritten and risked everything just to say, I was here. Now let the silence hold that for you, just for a while. Sleep well, you've earned it. Section 4, you're flying through a violet sky, then crash straight into water, cold, salty, dirty. You surface in the middle of the Nile Delta, around 1245 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II. But you're not royalty. Not a warrior. Not a priest. You clean up crocodile poop at a temple in Kam Ombo. No one tells you why crocodiles are sacred. They just are. They have their own pools, their own priests, and a special diet: bread, fresh fish, and, yes, unlucky children. If the rumors are true, you feed them in the morning. Scrub their droppings at noon. And at night, you hum them a holy lullaby to soothe the spirit of Sobek, the crocodile-headed god you're too afraid to look in the eyes. Historical fact: in ancient Egypt, Sobek was one of the most powerful deities, symbolizing strength, fertility, and protection. Crocodiles were kept in temple pools and worshipped as incarnations of the god. Some were even mummified after death. One evening, you notice the temple's favorite crocodile, you call him, Wet Eyes, isn't moving, you check for breath. Nothing, you check his eyes. Still open, glassy, you know, he's dead, you panic. The calm Ombo priests do not forgive death, not even sacred pet death. You wrap Wet Eyes in linen, dab on a few drops of resin, and quietly bury him behind the statue of Isis. You tell no one. A week later, someone asks, "Where's Wet Eyes?" You say, "He's sleeping in the river." Reborn. Like the sun. No one questions it. You've created a new myth. Odd fact, mummified crocodiles have been found at many sacred sites in Egypt. Some were carefully wrapped and even adorned with gold masks, proof of their high religious status. You live a few more years, then vanish into the night like Wet Eyes. No grave. No song, only sand. The next dream opens with darkness, no sun. No moon. Just ships, Scandinavia, 9th century. You're a kidnapped slave, taken from a seaside village and locked into a Viking longship headed south on a raiding journey. You're shackled with cold iron beside an old man who no longer speaks. He groans every time a wave hits the hull. Each groan is a funeral song. You listen to the Vikings laughing. They don't know your name. You don't know theirs. But one word sticks in your mind, Skjoldmer. They use it when they talk about a young girl on the ship, one who fights like fire and spits blood at the raider who tried to kiss her. She was beaten, but alive. And she whispers to you at night, "If I survive, I'll rewrite this whole story. If not, just remember this, I was never afraid of them." Historical fact, Viking women were not confined to housework. Some became warriors, called Skjoldmer, shield maidens. Featured in Norse sagas. Archaeological evidence has confirmed female remains buried with weapons and battle honors. You never learn if she lives or dies. A storm sinks half the ship. You wash up on a red shore, somewhere hot, dry, and foreign. You survive. And you remember, you tell the story to others. But no one believes a small girl bit a grown man to death. So you keep it for yourself. A secret. A personal myth. A hidden slice of history. Academic debate. Some scholars question the historical reality of female Viking warriors, suggesting the evidence may have been misinterpreted. However, recent DNA studies confirm that at least some elite Viking burials were of women. You don't care what they believe, you still have the scar on your wrist, and you still dream of swords tapping shields, like heartbeats in the dark. That drumbeat turns into wheels on wood. You wake up in Edo, Japan, around 1701. You're wearing a mask, a kabuki theater apprentice, only allowed to play demons. You kneel on stage, practicing the guttural growl of some nameless beast. Sweat runs through your white face paint. The audience laughs when you trip and fall off the platform, but one man doesn't laugh, a crusty old playwright with eyes sharper than an ink knife. He says, "You're not playing a demon." He hands you a band script. In it, a servant dares to look up at his lord. You perform it under the full moon, for just 3 people, in a bamboo grove. A secret play. No applause. Just a silence that cuts through bone. Odd historical fact, during the Edo period, kabuki was often banned or censored due to its rebellious themes. Some scripts were outlawed entirely, yet underground performances continued in hidden places. You never become a lead actor. But for one night, you are the voice of the unnamed. That night, the wind through the bamboo carries your lines to the sky, and you vanish, just before the first round of applause. A week later, a child finds it behind the grove, nestled between 2 stalks of bamboo like it grew there. The paint has smudged. The lacquer chipped. But the fear, the honest fear you poured into it, lingers. That child becomes a playwright, too. They never know your name, they never know they met a ghost, but they write a demon into every script they pen, and they always make it speak last. The next dream begins with fire. You're in Cordoba, Spain, 1085 CE, it's the library that draws you. Not the grand arches or the blue-tiled fountains or the humming streets thick with the scent of saffron and dust, but the books. You're a copyist's assistant, barely literate in Arabic, half literate in Latin, and completely overwhelmed by how many different stories fit inside one building. You shelve volumes older than kings, you handle parchment so delicate it crackles if you breathe wrong, you spend weeks carefully copying Persian astronomy texts, drawing diagrams of constellations you've never seen, but believe in anyway. One night, your master lets you sit beside him. He slides you a fresh page, you pick what to copy, he says, you panic. You flip through texts like you're drowning in knowledge, a poem catches your eye, about a blind man and the moon, you start to write. Historical fact, during the 10th to 12th centuries, Córdoba became a center of learning in Europe, with scholars of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim backgrounds translating, copying, and sharing texts in science, medicine, and poetry. Its libraries held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. You fall in love with ink. With the slant of letters, you memorize entire poems just from handling them so often. You begin to write your own in the margins, little verses hidden beside equations and theological arguments. You're careful. You're quiet, but one night, a scholar from Baghdad finds your work. He doesn't report you, he asks you to read one aloud. You do. Your hands shake, but your voice doesn't. He nods and says, then you must write more. He leaves a book from his own collection on your stool the next morning. Its cover is cracked. Its pages are heavy. Inside, someone long dead has written, there is no such thing as a silent library. Only readers who haven't yet heard the echo. You carry that line for the rest of your life. You never sign your name to your work, but hundreds of anonymous verses begin to circulate in the alleys of Córdoba. Some are recited by musicians. Others are painted on bathhouse walls, a few are scratched into stone. Years later, after the library burns, one of your poems survives in the ashes of a half-destroyed manuscript. Someone saves it, copies it again, passes it on. You don't remember dying, but you remember the fire, and how it smelled like roasted figs and sorrow. Your next breath smells like iron and rot. You're in a trench. France. 1917, you don't remember getting here. You just know the mud is higher than your ankles and your stomach growls louder than the artillery. You're a messenger. The kind that runs between explosions, no gun. Just a canvas bag filled with scrawled orders and a pencil stub you refuse to lose. You write notes in the corners of maps, not orders, poems, sometimes jokes. Once, you scribble a riddle that makes a colonel laugh for the first time in weeks. Your boots never dry. You name the rats. You whistle symphonies with no notes. Historical note, during World War I, trench warfare led to staggering psychological trauma. Soldiers often created art, music, and writing to cope. Fragments of poetry and letters have been found in dugouts, etched into helmets, or hidden in coat linings. One night, under a shell-pocked moon, a soldier in your unit reads one of your notes aloud. Others gather. No one speaks, and you realize, you're not just surviving. You're carving something real into a world determined to disappear. You are a quiet rebellion, a scribble in the margins of history. You live to see the end of the war. You lose a leg, but not your words. You return home. You don't talk about the front, but sometimes, in the early morning, you recite your poems into the mirror, just to hear your own voice say something beautiful. The next time you wake, you're underwater again, but this time it's warm. Salty, you're diving in the Mediterranean. Year? Hard to say. Maybe 2025. Maybe never. You're part of a research team recovering drowned cities. You hold a fragment of pottery between your fingers, brushing away barnacles like dust. There's something scratched into the clay, a symbol. Or a word. Or maybe both. You surface and hand it to your colleague. She smiles. It's a name, she says. Not recorded anywhere else. You ask whose. She shrugs. Someone who didn't think they'd be remembered. You stare at the waves. and wonder how many stories still sleep at the bottom of the sea, and now, this moment, this breath, you. Me. This voice in your head that may or may not be your own. We've traveled through myths, margins, trenches, temples, through languages long extinct and cities no longer marked on maps, but one thing stayed the same: you wrote something down, even when you weren't supposed to, even when it was dangerous, even when no one was listening, a prayer, a poem, a joke, a riddle, a confession scratched into stone behind a temple. A line hummed in the dark of a ship's belly, and now someone reads it, now, here, in this moment where dreams and memory bleed into one another. Maybe you're still afraid, maybe your voice still shakes, but remember what she said: if I survive, I'll rewrite this whole story. If not, just remember this: I was never afraid of them. And you weren't, not really, because you knew what they didn't. You cannot kill a story, you can only delay its telling. Now breathe, close your eyes, let the silence write you down again. Sleep well, you've earned it, again. Section 5, you're standing barefoot in dust and fire, the year is 480 BCE, and you're on the edge of the hot gates, Thermopylae. Not as a Spartan. Not even a soldier, you're a water carrier for the Persian army. You refill goatskin pouches from a bubbling spring nearby, hauling them up the slope while soldiers jeer and swat at you like flies. You don't understand the orders being shouted. But you understand the tension. Every face is tight with waiting, with calculation, with the itchy, animal sense that something awful is just beyond the ridge. Then, like thunder cracking a bone, it begins. Spartans charge from behind boulders, red cloaks snapping in the wind. You drop your water skins and run, ducking behind a cart as bronze crashes against bronze. For hours, the world is noise. Screams. Shouts. The sizzle of arrows. Someone sets fire to the field, and your only cover becomes smoke. You don't fight. You hide. You press your face into the dirt and wait for history to pass over you like a plague of horses. Historical fact: the Battle of Thermopylae was fought between a coalition of Greek city-states led by King Leonidas of Sparta and the invading Persian forces of Xerxes I. While the Spartans are famously remembered, the Persian army was a massive, multi-ethnic force, with countless workers, slaves, and support roles often forgotten by history. When it's over, and the air finally cools, you creep from your hiding place, dead everywhere. Spartans piled like red-draped scarecrows. Persians smeared across rocks like spilled ink. You take a sword from a corpse, not to use it, but to remember. It's heavier than you thought. Still warm, you find a horse, riderless and trembling, and climb on. You do not ride home, because you don't remember where that is anymore. You ride into nothing. A week later, or maybe 100 years, you are barefoot again, this time on icy cobblestone. Paris, 1793. The French Revolution is in full bloom, if guillotines count as flowers. You wake to the sound of clicks and whirs, not swords. Not wheels. Type bars, New York City, 1911. You're a young immigrant girl working in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. It's a Saturday. You're in your best shirtwaist blouse, fingers bleeding from the needle, when someone yells fire. At first, no one moves. Then, panic, the stairs are blocked. The doors are locked. You run for a window, but the heat punches you in the chest. You remember this moment forever, the way the air feels thick, the way fabric melts onto skin, the way someone screams your name, but it isn't your name anymore. You grab a girl beside you. You don't know her. You just don't want to die alone, together. You climb onto a ledge. Below, people are gathering. Some shout to jump. Others just scream. You jump, and land in a bed, not a real one, just soft grass, under a tree. Somehow, impossibly, you survived. Historical fact: the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire killed 146 workers, mostly immigrant women and girls. Locked doors and unsafe conditions led to one of the deadliest industrial disasters in U.S. history. The tragedy sparked massive labor reforms and safety regulations. you live. But you can't sew anymore. Your hands tremble too much, you clean houses now. Quiet work. You don't talk about the fire, but every time you smell burning fabric, your knees buckle. Odd detail, some survivors of the Triangle Fire refuse to enter buildings with more than 3 stories for the rest of their lives. Academic debate, was the fire the result of pure negligence or capitalist exploitation? Some historians say it was inevitable. Others argue it was preventable, if only profit hadn't come first. You don't care what they decide. You know what happened, you know the names no one speaks anymore, they walk beside you in silence, always. Until one night, they stop, you're alone again, but not lost, just somewhere else. There's sand in your mouth, and stars above, the kind of sky so wide it swallows everything beneath it, your thoughts, your name, your whole history, you're in Arabia. 632 CE, the last days of the Prophet Muhammad's life. You are not a warrior, not a scribe, you're the boy who sweeps the steps outside the Prophet's home in Medina. You barely speak, but you listen, you hear the conversations others miss, when the Prophet speaks gently to a child, or recites verses beneath his breath, or pauses mid-step just to feel the wind against his face. You carry water for his guests. You bring dates to the old woman who can no longer walk. You are a ghost to most people, quiet, quick, forgettable, but one morning, you see him sitting alone, gazing east. He calls you over with a whisper, you kneel, he says nothing for a while, then, even dust remembers light. You don't understand, but you nod. You want to ask what happens after death. Instead, you say, does the dust ever forget? He smiles, no. But people do. Historical fact, in the last days of Muhammad's life, he continued to receive visitors and deliver sermons despite illness. Many small moments, fragments of conversation or gestures, were remembered by those near him and passed on orally before being compiled into hadiths. The Prophet dies soon after. The city breaks open in grief. You are told to stay away from the mosque. You hide behind the wall and cry. Years later, you become a servant in a scribe's house. You hear people argue about what the Prophet said, how he stood, how he smiled. You do not argue. You write your own memory of him on a scrap of palm fiber and bury it beneath a fig tree. No one ever finds it, but you remember, and the dust does, too. The next life is colder. You're in Leningrad. 1942, winter has made statues out of the living. Winter has made statues out of the living. You are 12. Or maybe 16. It's hard to tell when hunger chews through the numbers. You carry a tin pot from building to building, hoping someone still has soup. Sometimes you find more snow than food, sometimes you find bodies before snow. Your father is gone, your mother is silent. You sing to her at night, even when she doesn't move. It helps. A little. Historical fact, the siege of Leningrad lasted from 1941 to 1944, killing over 1 million people, most from starvation. Temperatures often dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Many residents resorted to eating wallpaper paste or leather belts. One day, you find a page of music frozen to the ground. A cello line, you don't know how to read it, but the shape of the notes feels like something worth surviving for. You take it home, flatten it under your mattress. Later, when the orchestra plays Shostakovich's 7th Symphony across the city, broadcast through loudspeakers, a warning to the enemy that we are still here, you hum along. You cry so hard, your breath fogs your hands. You never eat wallpaper paste, but you think about it. When the siege lifts, you leave the city on trembling legs. You never return. You keep that cello page in your coat until it turns to dust. Odd detail, during the siege, musicians who survived rehearsed in freezing temperatures with barely any food to perform the 7th Symphony. Loudspeakers broadcast the performance even toward enemy lines, as both defiance and mourning. Academic reflection, some called the Leningrad Symphony a weapon. Others, a prayer. You just remember the sound, and how, for one moment, it replaced hunger. Then you're barefoot again, but on soft earth this time, rich, dark, teeming with life. Haiti. 1791, the revolution is about to begin. You are a child servant on a sugar plantation. You rise before the sun, your hands raw from cane knives. You know too much for your age. You know the weight of a whip, the silence of rebellion, the difference between a song and a signal. One night, by firelight, the elders speak in low voices. They call on spirits older than empires. They say the time is near. You don't understand the words, but you understand the rhythm. It sounds like running. It sounds like rising. Historical fact. The Haitian Revolution began in 1791 with a massive uprising of enslaved Africans against French colonial rule. It was the most successful slave revolt in history and led to the establishment of the first Black Republic. You do not fight with blades. You carry messages. You drop pebbles at certain doorsteps. You whisper in certain ears. You hum a lullaby that tells others when to run. One night, you witness fire sweep through the plantation. You think it is the end of the world, but then you see people dancing in the flames. You survive. You live to see Toussaint ride by, dust curling behind his horse. You live long enough to learn your real name, and when someone years later calls you a child during the revolution, you answer, I was not a child, I was a fuse. Now, this moment, you blink, you're back in your bed. Or maybe it's not a bed. Maybe it's a ship. A cot. A barn. A cave. A corner of memory where all your other lives sleep. You look at your hands. They feel different now, like they've held too many tools. Too many names. You remember the crack of fire, the sound of music and hunger, the feel of parchment, ash, silk, rope, the smell of blood and ink and river water, and you know, without needing to be told, that none of those lives were wasted, none of those stories were too small. You weren't always brave, you weren't always kind, but you were always real, and real things, however quiet, do not disappear, they ripple. So when someone asks, centuries from now, who remembers? The silence will answer with your name, or something close enough. Close your eyes. You've carried revolutions in your breath. You've walked through fire and famine and fog. Sleep now, history is tired, and so are you. But tomorrow, we begin again. Section 6, you're blinking under a heavy sun. The smell of oil and dust stings your nose. It's Baghdad, 1258 CE, and you're holding a brass jar that once held honey, now filled with ink. You're the apprentice of a scribe, working in the house of wisdom. Not that you feel very wise. Most days you're just refilling lamps, running errands, and cleaning goose quills with vinegar and spit, but today is different. Today, the city trembles. You hear it before you see it. The Mongols have arrived. Their drums are distant thunder. Their catapults lurch like angry beasts. And then, fire, historical fact, in February 1258, the Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, sacked Baghdad, then one of the most important cultural and intellectual centers in the world. The city, known for its libraries, universities, and scholars, was utterly devastated. Books burn. Scrolls are tossed into the Tigris River. You're ordered to run, but you don't. You grab what you can, a copy of Euclid's Elements, a translation of Aristotle, a treatise on the motion of stars. You hide them under your robe and slip out the back gate as the city crumbles behind you. The river runs black, not from blood, but from ink. So many manuscripts were thrown into the water that they say the fish forgot how to swim straight. You walk for days, then weeks. You don't talk to anyone. You don't write either, you just carry the books. Odd fact, some chroniclers claimed the Mongols destroyed so many manuscripts that the Tigris ran dark with ink. While this may be an exaggeration, the symbolic weight of the story remains powerful. One night, you reach a quiet hilltop village where no one has ever seen a book before. You open one under candlelight. Children gather. You start reading aloud. Slowly, they listen, wide-eyed, as you speak the names of stars. You do not save Baghdad. But you save a sliver of it, and that's enough. Academic debate. Some historians argue that the loss of Baghdad set back scientific progress in the Islamic world for centuries. Others say knowledge migrated, finding new homes in Cairo, Damascus, and even Europe. The truth may lie in between, a fracture, not an end. You sleep beneath the stars, whispering the constellations like prayers. You never forget the sound of burning pages. You open your eyes to the sharp scent of metal and sweat. You're in London, 1854. The city stinks of coal, horse droppings, and something worse. You're an orphan working in a brewery, not because you like beer, but because the brewery has its own well, everyone else is sick. Cholera, but the brewery stays clean. You survive, you think it's a miracle, until one day, a man with wild hair and ink-stained fingers comes to interview you. He asks where you get your water. He asks how many people in your building are still alive. He draws a map. His name is John Snow. Historical fact: in 1854, physician John Snow traced the source of a deadly cholera outbreak in London to a contaminated water pump on Broad Street. His use of mapping and data visualization is considered a foundational moment in the field of epidemiology. You become his errand runner. You help mark excess on the map. You fetch papers and ink. You hand him his coat when he runs into the street to tell the city council. They remove the pump handle. People start to live. It's the first time you feel like you mattered. Unusual detail: Snow's findings were initially dismissed by many officials who still believed in the miasma theory, that disease came from bad air, not water. Only after repeated outbreaks was his work truly appreciated. You go on to work as a nurse's assistant. You never get to study medicine, but you learn to boil everything. You never trust water from a stranger again. Academic debate: while John Snow is now hailed as the father of modern epidemiology, some argue his methods weren't statistically rigorous by today's standards. Still, his intuition and use of data were revolutionary for his time. One night, you get sick yourself. You lie in a cot, listening to the rattling breath of other patients, and you wonder, will someone draw a map for you? Someone does, but instead of disease, it maps all the places you survived. You awaken to drums and dust again, but now you're in Benin, West Africa, around the year 1490. You're a brass caster, part of a proud guild that makes plaques and statues for the royal palace. Your father taught you the lost wax method. How to carve beeswax, wrap it in clay, melt it, and pour molten metal into the mold. You burn your fingers often, but the results are breathtaking: elephants, kings, warriors, leopards, all frozen in brass. You work mostly at night, when it's cooler. The furnace roars like a lion. Sparks fly like fireflies. You feel powerful. Not because of the art, but because your work will last. Historical fact: the Kingdom of Benin, in modern-day Nigeria, was renowned for its sophisticated metalwork, particularly bronze and brass plaques that depicted court life and mythology. Many of these artworks were looted by British forces in 1897. You don't know about the British yet. You only know that your guild is sacred. Your hands are part of a lineage stretching back centuries. One day, a foreign visitor arrives, white, sweaty, and wide-eyed. He offers to buy one of your plaques. You say no. He says, it's just art. You say, it's a memory. He laughs. You don't. Later that week, he steals one anyway. Years pass. You grow old. You see more foreigners come. Some bring gifts. Some bring guns. You hide your best work deep in the earth. Unusual fact: some Benin bronzes remained hidden for centuries, buried to protect them from colonial looting. Many still remain missing or in private collections today. Academic debate: discussions around the restitution of Benin bronzes continue in the 21st century. Should museums return them? Were they purchased or stolen? Who decides what belongs to whom? You don't know the answers, but you know this: what you made still speaks. It speaks in metal, in curves, in silence, and somewhere, in a dark room in a foreign land, a child sees one of your works and feels something ancient stir. Section 7. You're shivering beneath a blanket made of wool and hope. It's Leningrad, the winter of 1942. You're 10 years old, and the cold is not the worst part. It's the hunger that gnaws like a quiet animal under your ribs. You haven't seen an apple in months. You dream about bread. Sometimes, you chew on book glue, because someone said it has calories. The city is under siege. Outside, the German artillery shells fall with mechanical rhythm, like someone drumming on the lid of a coffin. Inside, the stove hasn't worked in weeks. Your parents burn furniture. Then books. Then nothing, you go to school anyway. It's warmer there, and the teacher gives you exactly 1 tablespoon of porridge. You've never tasted anything better. Historical fact: during the siege of Leningrad, 1941 to 1944, more than 1 million people died, mostly from starvation. The siege lasted 872 days, one of the longest and most devastating in modern history. One morning, you're walking across the frozen Neva River when the ice groans beneath your feet. You don't look down. You look up, at the sky that still dares to be blue, even in this horror. Later that day, a man collapses in front of you. No one helps. They just step around him, as if he's already part of the pavement. You blink, and you're not in Leningrad anymore. You're in a jungle, soaked with sweat. It's Vietnam, 1968. You're barely 19. Drafted into a war you don't understand. You thought you'd be a hero. You mostly clean boots and stare into the trees, afraid of things that never make noise. You write letters home that lie, everything's fine. The food's not bad. I made a friend. You have not made a friend. You don't remember your own name, most days, but there's a village. And a girl in a red scarf who brings you coffee one morning, without a word. She doesn't smile. But she sees you. Really see you. You share a cigarette. It's the most human moment you've had in weeks. Then the shelling starts again. She runs. You don't see her again. Historical fact: the Vietnam War saw intense American involvement between 1955 and 1975, with the Tet Offensive in 1968 marking a psychological turning point. Civilian casualties and confusion blurred lines between soldier and victim, right and wrong. Later that month, you hear your name shouted and think it's an angel, but it's just a medic. You've been hit in the leg. Not bad. Enough to go home. You're supposed to feel lucky. You don't. Back home, you limp through a parade where no one claps. No one wants to hear your story. So you don't tell it. You work construction. You drink too much. You stop dreaming. Then one night, at a gas station, a man in a red scarf sells you a coffee. You blink. He looks at you, really looks, and says nothing. You nod, and something inside you, just for a second, unclenches. Odd fact: many American veterans reported more trauma after returning home than during combat, due to alienation and the controversial nature of the war. Scholarly debate: some argue the Vietnam War was unwinnable from the start due to terrain, public opinion, and guerrilla warfare. Others maintain that diplomatic failures and lack of cultural understanding doomed the mission. The only clear fact: everyone lost something. You drive home in silence, coffee trembling in your hand. You blink again, and you're standing in a dusty field, sunlight hammering the ground. You're in South Africa, 1990. A crowd has gathered outside a prison. You're selling mango slices on sticks, not really knowing what's happening, just that something big is. Then the gates open. A man walks out. Tall. Calm. Like a mountain made of time, Nelson Mandela. The crowd erupts. You drop your mangoes and climb onto a friend's shoulders just to see him better. You don't know why you're crying. You just are. Historical fact: after 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela was released in February 1990. His release marked a pivotal moment in South Africa's transition away from apartheid. You don't understand politics, but you understand joy. This is what it looks like when a country breathes again. Later that year, you attend a rally. You don't chant, you just listen, because sometimes, hope is loudest when you say nothing. Unusual fact: after his release, Mandela made a point of greeting even his former jailers with warmth. His focus on reconciliation rather than revenge is considered one of the key reasons South Africa avoided a civil war. You eventually become a schoolteacher. You hang a photo of Mandela on the classroom wall. when students ask who he is, you tell them, he made a country out of its broken pieces. They don't always get it, but they will. Academic debate. Some historians argue that Mandela's peaceful transition preserved a system of economic inequality. Others claim it was the only path that prevented mass bloodshed. Both can be true. Peace often comes with a price tag, and sometimes, history is just a mango slice left in the dust, sweet, gone, remembered. Back in the present, you feel a buzz, not a war. Not a plague, just your phone. You're in Hong Kong, 2019. You're a student again, face covered by a surgical mask, not for illness, but for protection. The streets are full. Signs in every language. Umbrellas everywhere. You're marching, not with guns, but with light. Your flashlight is your voice. Historical fact. In 2019, millions of Hong Kongers protested against a proposed extradition bill, which was seen as a threat to the city's autonomy. The protests expanded into a larger pro-democracy movement, marked by decentralized organization and high-tech communication. You use airdrop to share leaflets. You buy your subway pass with cash. You erase texts every night before bed. This is war 2.0, no front line. No uniform, but the fear is the same. You lose friends. Not in death, at least, not most of them, but in disappearance. Arrest. Silence. You still show up. You hold a sign that simply says, I am here. That's all you can promise. Unusual detail. Protesters used hand signals to pass messages across large crowds, like human semaphores. Some even built mini catapults to launch tear gas canisters back at police. Academic debate. Is this the end of Hong Kong's autonomy, or the beginning of something new? Some historians say resistance is futile. Others say it is the most human thing there is. You don't know, but you walk, one foot in front of the other, even when your shoes feel full of stones. Section 8. You're surrounded by the hum of machines and the soft glow of screens. It's Silicon Valley, 2023. You're sitting at a standing desk, sipping cold brew, writing code. You're building an app that helps people sleep better. You haven't slept properly in 3 weeks. Your life is frictionless. Groceries arrive without being touched. Music knows what you want before you do, and your watch tells you when you're stressed. You call it optimization. But sometimes, when the servers go quiet at 2 a.m., you wonder, what are we really building? Historical fact. By the 2020s, tech companies dominated global markets and shaped everyday life. Algorithms mediated everything from romantic relationships to financial decisions. The promise of progress collided with concerns over privacy, misinformation, and burnout. Your coworker, Raj, once said something that stuck: we're not coding solutions. We're coding biases. We just don't know which ones yet. You laughed at the time. You don't know, because last week, your own app started sending grief notifications, a feature you didn't remember programming. It compiled the things you hadn't done, hadn't said, hadn't saved. You didn't debug it. You let it run. Now, every morning, it tells you, call your grandmother. Delete those drafts. Go outside. You start listening. You delete your social media. You take a train to visit your grandmother. She doesn't remember you at first. You show her your app. She says, what's wrong with just writing things down? You don't have an answer. Unusual fact. Many tech workers in Silicon Valley eventually leave the industry due to burnout, ethical disillusionment, or a desire for simplicity. A growing tech exodus has led some to homestead, farm, or become full-time caretakers. Academic debate. Some argue technology isolates us, while others claim it creates new forms of connection. The truth may depend not on the tool, but how it's used, and who controls it. You go back to work on your app. But now its first screen just says, take a breath. You take one, and finally, it feels like a feature, not a flaw. You wake up again, in a quiet room. But it's not a room, it's a capsule, orbiting Earth. You're an astronaut on the first civilian mission to the moon. There are only 5 of you. 2 scientists. one poet, one engineer. And you, the historian, you're here not to build, or explore, but to remember. You've brought with you a tiny archive, songs, folktales, photos, recipes, fragments of languages no longer spoken. Things that don't matter, but do. You spend the journey reading stories to the crew, your voice floats in zero gravity, curling through the air like steam. When you read a poem from 14th century Persia, the pilot closes her eyes. When you hum a lullaby from Ghana, the botanist quietly weeps. Odd fact, NASA and private space agencies are increasingly considering roles beyond engineers, like artists and humanists, to help preserve culture in off-world missions. One Japanese billionaire even proposed sending a crew of creatives around the moon, halfway to lunar orbit. Someone asks, why bring old stories into the future? You answer, because otherwise, we forget what it means to be human. Academic debate, will humanity colonize other planets only to repeat old mistakes? Or will we take with us not just machines, but wisdom? The argument continues. But up there, circling the moon, you understand something for the first time. History isn't behind us, it's inside us, and wherever we go, it comes, too. And now, finally, you're back where we started, the Museum of Memory. You've wandered through wars and wonders. You've worn sandals, boots, lab coats, and rags. You've been a farmer, student, prisoner, artist, scribe. You didn't always live long, you didn't always win, but you always carried something forward, a book, a map, a lullaby, a lantern, a line of code, a question, a name. In the center of the museum, there's a mirror. You step forward, you look in, and you see not one face, but thousands, all of them you, all of them human, none of them are forgotten. You reach out, fingertips grazing the mirror, but it doesn't feel like glass, it feels like breathing. Like memory exhaling, and for a heartbeat, you aren't sure if you're looking into something, or through it, because on the other side, there they are, all the versions of you, the water carrier with ash on their face, the trench messenger with shaking knees, the kabuki actor bowed to the shadows, the boy who hid poems in censored books, the girl with fire on her hands and smoke in her lungs. You blink, and now they're behind you, not ghosts, not illusions, but evidence, and in the silence, you finally ask the question that's been trailing you for lifetimes. Was it enough? A breath catches in your throat. Did anything I carried last? The mirror doesn't answer, but something behind it does. It's not a voice, not words, it's a flicker, a page, half burned but still legible, a name carved into the underside of a stool in a concentration camp, a lullaby recorded by a homesick astronaut and beamed back to Earth. It's a quilt in a museum, stitched with scraps of clothes from people whose census entries were erased, a fragment of DNA in a tomb no one meant to open. A tree growing where someone once whispered goodbye, and it says, yes, yes, it lasted, because it touched someone, and that someone touched someone else. And that ripple is how time really moves. You step back, around you, the Museum of Memory shifts, walls dissolve into seafoam, ceilings unfurl into sky. You are standing now in the open, on a hill somewhere both real and not. Beneath your feet, centuries of soil, layered with footprints you don't remember making. Ahead of you, a path. It curves gently out of sight. No signposts, no warnings, no maps, just one thing, a small, weathered sign staked into the dirt. It reads, here begins the stories not yet told. Not because the ground is uneven, but because your legs remember every life before this. You've limped through revolutions, you've run from flames, you've climbed mountains with no flags at the summit, but here, now, the climb feels different. You're not running anymore, you're returning, to a future built on fragments, to a moment that needs a witness. A child waits by the roadside, barefoot, dusty, and utterly ordinary. They look up at you and ask, do you know any stories? You sit beside them, you don't choose the tale with the most glory, you tell them about the poet who wrote in the margins, the one who never signed their name, the one who was never applauded, but was heard. The child listens, wide-eyed. They say, "That sounds like me." You smile. It was you. A long time ago. Or maybe tomorrow. They laugh. You keep walking. Soon, you pass through a place made of paper. Every surface, walls, sky, even the birds, is covered in writing. Some of it is ancient, some of it new, some of it half erased, waiting for you to finish the line. The librarian greets you. She has no face, but her presence is warm. She asks if you'd like to write something down. You hesitate, then take the pen. You don't write a speech, or a manifesto. You write the first thing that's ever truly belonged to you. It's not even a sentence, just a moment. I was kind once, when no one noticed. You hand the page back. The librarian nods. That's the kind that survives. You journey on. You pass a forest made of whispers. Each tree holds a forgotten language. They murmur prayers, recipes, lullabies, curses. You walk quietly. One branch leans down and presses against your palm. You don't know the words, but your body remembers them. They feel like home. Odd linguistic fact: scientists estimate that one language dies every 2 weeks. Each time, an entire way of seeing the world disappears. You trace your fingers along the bark. You trace your fingers along the bark. You promise, not out loud, but with the part of you that stays awake in dreams, to remember even this. Eventually, you reach a wide field, empty, but you feel something humming below it. You kneel, place your ear to the earth. It's not silence, it's a choir. Every life you've ever lived is singing, not in unison, not even in harmony, but layered, raw, real. One voice cracks, another screams. One forgets the words entirely and just hums, and yet, somehow, it all fits. The song is called, "You Were Here." Night falls, stars bloom like old wounds finally healing. You lie back in the grass, arms out, breath slow, and you remember the first time you looked at a fire and thought, this means something. The first time you held a baby and thought, this matters. The first time you lost someone and realized the ache was memory. You fall asleep there, and the world waits with you. When you wake, it's dawn. The museum of memory is gone, but you are not empty. In your pocket, a key, a date, a line of music, a scent you can't name, a question no one answered, and a name, your name, that feels heavier now, because it includes so much more than just you. You walk down the hill. Someone is building something below, not a city, not a monument, but a small circle of stones, a place to sit, to share, to begin again. They wave to you, you wave back, and for once, you don't wonder where you're going. You know, you're going to tell the next story, to the next child, or stranger, or future, or a fragment of yourself, curled somewhere in the corners of time, still waiting for a voice. You take a deep breath, and begin. Once, there was someone who remembered. Section 9, you're not in a space capsule anymore. You're not floating. You're stuck in Beijing, 2025. The city is vast, the sky is gray, and the surveillance cameras follow you like silent birds. You live in a smart apartment. It knows when you wake up, what you eat, how you vote, or at least, how you should. You're a foreign exchange student, here on scholarship. You thought it would be exciting. A language adventure. A cultural deep dive. Instead, you learn to hold your tongue like it's breakable porcelain. Your phone doesn't ring anymore, but your citizen score does go up, when you scan your face at intersections. When you like the right videos. When you say nothing at all. You learn to do nothing beautifully. Historical fact, by the mid-2020s, China's social credit system had expanded in scope, affecting housing access, travel, loans, and even dating. While officially framed as a tool to promote trust, its critics saw it as digital authoritarianism. One day, you accidentally post a photo with a book in the background. Harmless? Not exactly. The book was once banned. It isn't anymore, technically, but the algorithm remembers. Within an hour, your professor cancels your lecture invite. Within a day, your university account is locked. Within a week, you receive a call, they suggest you leave the country, no threats. Just a recommendation. You pack at midnight. You don't say goodbye to anyone. You don't cry, because somehow, you understand that in this place, even your tears are watched. Unusual fact, in certain Chinese universities, AI-powered emotion recognition software was trialed in classrooms, tracking student focus, mood, and engagement in real time. Some students reported self-censoring their facial expressions. Academic debate: is the rise of surveillance technology a cultural inevitability or a political choice? Some scholars argue that advanced monitoring can offer safety and efficiency. Others warn that once privacy is gone, it never returns, not completely. You arrive at the airport, the passport control officer scans your eyes, your fingerprints, your posture. He asks nothing, he waves you through. Outside, it's snowing. You hadn't even noticed the season changing. You breathe in. Freedom doesn't taste like fresh air, it tastes like not being recorded. You're on a plane now, next stop, Nairobi, 2065, it's the future. Not slick, not neon. Just, warm. You've taken a job in historical restoration. Your specialty? Rebuilding digital archives that were erased in the cyber wars of the 2040s. Because yes, someone tried to delete entire continents' worth of stories. Africa didn't forget, it was harder to remember. You're helping recover a library built inside a baobab tree, using solar routers and sand battery tech. Children run by with smart slates strapped to their backs. Elders scan old papers into cloud stones like they're saving souls. You spend your days digitizing Swahili love poems, 1960s radio plays, and an entire cookbook from Zimbabwe that uses 14 kinds of smoke as seasoning. Historical fact: Africa has been at the forefront of digital leapfrogging, skipping analog infrastructure in favor of mobile-first tech. By the 2050s, several countries led in renewable innovations and cultural AI systems. One day, an old woman brings you a stack of letters written during the Rwandan genocide. She says her daughter never read them. She asks if you will. You do, every single one. You stay up all night, not crying, just feeling. You input them carefully into the archive. You tag each one: loss, forgiveness, memory. In the morning, you give her a copy. She says, now my daughter can find me, even if she's a ghost. Odd fact: in post-conflict zones, digitized personal artifacts, letters, voice notes, even WhatsApp chats, are now used in reconciliation rituals, digital shrines, and truth commissions. Academic debate: can digital memory replace physical presence? Is archiving trauma a form of healing or exploitation? The scholars still argue, as they always will, but here in Nairobi, you are not arguing, you are remembering, you are restoring, and when the baobab server hums back to life and displays a grandmother's love letter on its bark screen, the children cheer like they've seen magic, because they have. You blink again, and this time, you're not in a city, or a jungle, or a lab. You're standing in the middle of a desert, Alula, Saudi Arabia, 130 CE. You're a caravan guide now, robed in, sunburnt, with sand in your shoes and coins in your sash. You speak 5 languages badly and 1 language. The language of trade, perfectly. Your camel is named Afterthought. She's stubborn, like you. You've guided priests and smugglers, scribes and poets. But this trip is different. One of your clients is carrying something priceless, a scroll from Alexandria, thought lost in the Great Fire. The scroll isn't gold, but it's heavier than gold, because it remembers. You guard it fiercely. Bandits come. You outsmart them. Sandstorms rise. You find shelter. Your client asks you why you care so much about ink on old plant fiber. You say, because someone wrote this. And no one should ever burn a person's words twice. He doesn't laugh. He just walks beside you in silence after that. Historical fact: the Nabatean and Roman trade networks once connected Arabia with India, the Mediterranean, and North Africa. Alula was a major stop along these routes, rich with multicultural exchange and hidden libraries. You arrive safely in Petra. You hand over the scroll. You take your coin, you don't look back, but years later, in a quiet home, you teach your child to read using a copied line from that scroll. She stumbles over the letters, then gets them right, then says, "Can I write something now?" You nod, and hand her the pen. She writes slowly, tongue between her teeth, each letter careful and wobbly. When she's done, she shows you, a single sentence, crooked but clear, "I am real." You smile, heart catching in your throat. You want to say, "That's everything," but instead, you only whisper, "Yes." You are. Because in that moment, across ink and breath and memory, you feel it, the scroll has not been lost, not really, it just changed hands, and that's all history ever does, pass through us, waiting to be carried. You blink again, but this time, you don't land in a place, you land in a feeling, cold. Damp. Stone, you're underground, Scotland. 1662, you're in the back of a village church. Disguised as a mason's apprentice, but really, you're copying letters. Not from the Bible, but from a forbidden text, a woman's journal. It had been hidden in a chimney, beneath a loose stone. Someone found it, tried to burn it, failed. Now it's in your hands. You're not supposed to know how to read, but you do, because your mother taught you, quietly, with ash on the floor, while the others were asleep. Historical fact, during the 17th century witch trials in Scotland, hundreds of women were executed based on spectral evidence, folk practices, or rumor. Some left behind diaries, charms, or coded notes that survived in fragments. The journal isn't spells, it's recipes. Dreams. Descriptions of birds. A drawing of a laughing child. One entry reads, "They fear us not for what we conjure, but for what we remember." You copy that one twice. You tuck one copy into your sleeve, and hide the other beneath a pew. Outside, the church bell rings. There's a trial today. You say nothing. You keep your head down. But that night, you teach someone else how to read the words, and they teach someone else. Unusual detail. A growing body of scholarship now reconsiders witchcraft documents as proto-feminist resistance texts, coded knowledge, passed down under persecution, often by women who lacked the power to speak publicly. You don't know about theory, but you know this: the word survived, and so, somehow, did you. Now it's light again, too bright, fluorescent, institutional. You're in a hospital, Berlin. 1987, you're a janitor. No formal degree. No clipboard, but you've memorized the shifts of the East German guards, and you know which beds are bugged, because this isn't just a hospital, it's a psychiatric ward, and some of the patients aren't ill, they're inconvenient. Artists. Protesters. Queer kids. Readers, your job isn't just mopping floors, it's slipping in pages, books banned by the regime. Poems printed in microdots. Folded pamphlets sewn into pillow seams. You give a girl a copy of Die Blechtrommel, she stares at it like you've handed her a flame. You whisper, "Only read it when the lights flicker." She nods. Historical fact, under East Germany's Stasi regime, many forms of expression were criminalized. But samizdat, secretly printed or passed around literature, flourished underground, often smuggled in by dissidents or sympathetic workers. One day, she's gone, transferred. Or worse, you never find out, but 3 weeks later. A new patient arrives, a boy, and he's mouthing the words from Die Blechtrommel. You ask him where he learned it. He shrugs. Someone scratched it into the underside of a drawer. You almost laugh. Instead, you say, "Keep scratching." You retire next year. No one remembers your name, but they remember the books, and that, you think, is more than enough. Now it's dusk again. You're on a boat, not a big one, just a ferry, rocking gently between islands. Tuvalu, 2103. Most of the cities are underwater now, but the people are still here. You're a climate archivist, not a scientist, not a savior, just someone tasked with listening. You carry a solar recorder and a waterproof notepad. you ask questions like, what did your grandmother's garden smell like? And, what did your childhood look like before the tide came? You take down answers that the news doesn't care about, the sound of frogs that no longer live here, the lullabies sung when the wind turns cruel, the taste of mangoes that haven't grown since 2081, historical projection. As sea levels rise, entire island nations face existential threats, not only to land, but to culture. Some activists and anthropologists have begun oral climate mapping to preserve threatened stories before they vanish. One elder gives you a phrase you never forget, the land is not lost, only changed. And we still carry its song. You store it. Back it up 10 times, etch it onto a coral-safe drive, tattoo it, just a line of code, onto your inner arm, so that no matter what washes away, that voice stays. Unusual detail, several low-lying island cultures now mandate dual record-keeping, one digital, one oral. Children learn to recite maps, genealogies, and sea routes the way others learn the alphabet. You leave the island knowing it may not exist in 20 years, but its memory will, because someone held the recorder, because someone asked, because someone listened, and now, you're back. Not in any specific century, just here. Inside yourself, the past trailing like a comet tail, the future is blinking just beyond the horizon. You realize something, you were never just visiting history, you were history, a vessel. A ripple. A breath passed between eras. You sit beneath a tree, not ancient, not new, just a tree, and beneath it, you write one more line, if you find this, know that I was paying attention. Because maybe that's the secret, not conquest. Not invention, but attention. You close your eyes, and let the centuries exhale around you. Section 10, you blink, and the pen is still in your hand, but the year is now 1770, and you are no longer in the desert, you're in Paris, just before the revolution, and you're not just anyone, you are a pamphleteer, you write by candlelight, on stolen paper, with ink that smells like rust and rage, your words are dangerous. They call kings fools, bishops thieves, and the wealthy, dead men walking, and yet, they spread. The streets are too loud to hear gunfire, but quiet enough to hear whispers. And in every alley, someone is reading what you wrote. You don't sign your name. You don't have to, your words burn on their own, historical fact, in the years leading up to the French Revolution. Thousands of radical pamphlets circulated illegally, attacking the monarchy, the church, and the aristocracy. Many were anonymous, ghostwritten, or printed abroad. One of your pamphlets is about bread. You write, if they cannot feed us, they do not deserve our silence. It ends up scrawled in chalk across the door of a bakery the next morning. That day, the bakery is raided, not by soldiers, but by the hungry. Later, someone thanks you for it. You don't feel proud, you feel responsible. Odd fact, before Twitter, before blogs, pamphlets were the viral medium. Some reached tens of thousands of readers. And like modern memes, many were anonymous, witty, and brutal. One night, you're caught distributing pages under a bridge, you run. They chase, you duck into a cellar, where a printer is working late. He doesn't ask questions. He hides you behind the wine crates, he gives you a crust of bread and says, revolutions aren't written. They whispered. He's right, because within months, Paris is on fire, the Bastille falls, the king is arrested, and on the streets, people are quoting you. You never see the inside of a palace, but your words do. They echo through courtrooms, into prisons, across oceans. Academic debate. Was the French Revolution driven more by Enlightenment philosophy or material desperation? Was it freedom, or fury, that pulled the monarchy down? Some say both, others say, a starving man will eat whatever he's handed, even a flag. You wake up, and you're drowning. No, not quite. You're just soaked. The year is 1912, and you're aboard a ship, the Titanic. You're a second-class passenger. Not rich. Not poor. A teacher, maybe. Or a violinist. Someone with dreams just starting to bloom. It's cold. The air tastes of salt and irony. You know what's coming, everyone knows what's coming, because you've read the history books, but right now, it's all so normal. A steward tips his hat. A child chases a hoop across the deck. Someone's laughing below, you pause, you breathe, because even tragedy has a before. Historical fact, the RMS Titanic struck an iceberg on April 14, 1912, and sank in the early hours of April 15. Over 1,500 people died. The ship was considered unsinkable due to its state-of-the-art design. The moment hits like silence. 1 second you're sipping tea, the next, you're lurching sideways, tea staining your sleeves, people shouting in 5 languages at once. You help an elderly couple with their life jackets. You give your coat to a child. You hear the band playing as the ship tilts like a question mark. Someone near you mutters, "What a beautiful night." It is. That's the cruel part. Unusual fact, survivors reported the sky was unusually clear that night. The sea was calm. The stars are bright. And the band really did keep playing until the very end. As the lifeboats are full, you don't push, you don't scream, you just write your name on a scrap of paper and slip it into a stranger's coat pocket, then you step aside. You never make it, but months later, when the coat is recovered, that paper is found, and someone, maybe a journalist, maybe a relative, reads your name aloud, and in that moment, you live again. Academic debate: was the Titanic a failure of hubris, of design, or of class? Some argue that more lives could have been saved if third-class passengers had been given earlier access to the lifeboats. Others say the real tragedy was how we chose who lived. You drift, and the water is not cruel. It's quiet. You open your eyes, and now, you're in a courtroom. It's South Africa, 1964. You're in the public gallery at the Rivonia trial, and you're listening to Nelson Mandela speak. That he says, "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." You feel your breath catch, the room is hushed, the weight of his words sitting on every shoulder. You've never seen someone so calm in the face of so much power. You realize, sometimes, the loudest rebellion is simply not lowering your eyes. Historical fact, Nelson Mandela and other members of the African National Congress were tried for sabotage against the apartheid government. Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment, spending 27 years behind bars before becoming president in 1994. You walk out of that courtroom changed. You stop believing in neutrality. You start working with underground press groups, sending stories abroad. You learn to develop film in the dark and speak in metaphors. Once, you're caught carrying leaflets. You're lucky. You get a beating, not a bullet. You recover. And keep going, because you know, if they stop you from speaking, they'll stop others from listening. Odd fact, in apartheid-era South Africa, even jazz songs, poems, and plays could be censored or banned. Artists often used double meanings or coded language to express defiance. Years later, you watch Mandela walk out of prison on TV. He raises his fist, you raise yours, quietly, in your living room, and whisper. History moves slowly, until it doesn't. Section 11, you're barefoot, the floor beneath you is red clay, warm and cracked. You look up, and the sky above is not blue, it's a deep, ancient gold. You're in Catalhoyuk, 7,500 BCE, not a kingdom. Not a city-state. Just one of the first places humans called home, and you're there, not as a queen or warrior or oracle. You're just a potter. Your hands are caked with ash and ochre. You shape the world in silence, the air smells like fire and wet earth. A child sneezes behind you, you glance back. Smile. Return to the wheel. Historical fact, Catalhoyuk, located in present-day Turkey, is one of the oldest known permanent settlements, with complex murals, ritual spaces, and communal architecture, but no known hierarchy. No kings. No temples. No streets, just rooftops and ladders. You don't lock your doors, because there are none. People walk across roofs like cats, climbing down into homes from the ceiling. Everything is communal, food, tools, even stories. You trade pots for dried figs, woven mats, and sometimes gossip, and that's where things get interesting. Someone says a new burial was found under house 32. The skeleton was painted red. Teeth filed. Hands folded like wings. They say the body belongs to the bird speaker. You laugh. A myth, you think. Or an old woman who told too many stories, but that night, your dreams are strange, feathers on fire. A face with no mouth. Words you don't know but somehow understand. When you wake up, you go to house 32, you sit quietly, and you speak, not in your voice, in hers. People gather. They listen. No one asks how you know what you're saying, but the village changes. You're no longer just the potter, you are the keeper of memory. Odd fact, excavations at Catalhoyuk uncovered female figurines, wall paintings, and deliberately arranged burials that suggest rich symbolic lives. Some scholars speculate that oral storytelling may have been considered a sacred act. You live a long life, never leave the village, never stop speaking. One day, your granddaughter asks what happens when we die. You touch her cheek and say, we melt into the stories. The good ones. Academic debate, was Catalhoyuk egalitarian or matriarchal? Was it peaceful or just small enough to avoid war? Archaeologists debate how far we can project social structure from burial patterns and room layouts. You die, no one writes your name, but someone buries you with a clay flute and a line scratched into the wall above your bones. She gave shape to silence. You blink, you're in Baghdad, 900 CE, the smell hits you first, spices, ink, old parchment, and sandalwood. You're in the house of wisdom, it's early morning. The city is already alive. But inside these walls, the world is still, because this is where ideas come to sleep, wake, fight, and multiply. You're a translator, specifically, a woman, one of the few allowed within these golden halls. Your father taught you Syriac and Greek. Your mother taught you logic and patience. You're working on Aristotle today, and arguing, because the caliph's vizier wants the word softened. Less godless, more metaphysical. You say, truth doesn't care what men prefer. He frowns, but it doesn't stop you. Historical fact, during the Islamic Golden Age, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad was a hub for translation and scholarship, where Greek, Persian, Indian, and local knowledge was preserved and expanded. Women participated more than often assumed, especially within elite families. At night, you sneak time to write your own treatise, under a false name. You're building a theory of empathy as logic, using algebraic notation and medical metaphors. You don't expect it to survive, but it will, hidden in a footnote. Copied by a Jewish scribe in Andalusia. Translated again in Florence. Rediscovered centuries later by a neuropsychologist who quotes you unknowingly in a TED Talk. Your words will live longer than empires. Unusual fact. Many medieval texts contain marginal notes and unattributed treatises that, some believe, were written by scholars who could not sign their names, due to gender, religion, or politics. One morning, your scrolls are wet with dew, the Tigris has flooded, books are moved upstairs. People panic, you sit calmly, because you know the mind's water is deeper. Academic debate, did the Islamic Golden Age end due to the Mongol invasions, internal theological shifts, or political fragmentation? Or did it simply evolve into other forms? Your city will burn one day, but your scroll survives, just one, wrapped in waxed cloth, stuffed into a traveling satchel, passed hand to hand across a century. And one day, someone reads it aloud, in a language you don't know, but your logic is clear, and your soul, briefly, speaks again. Now, you're somewhere familiar, a mall, maybe. A terminal. A station with too much glass and not enough time. You're in Tokyo, 2087, and everything's clean. Too clean, you scan your wrist to pay for air. You step onto a silent train that smells like static. You're not a worker. You're a narrative hygiene engineer. That's right, you clean stories. You work for a tech giant that sells peace of mind, via emotion scrubbers. People pay to forget. Ex-boyfriends. Dead dogs. Embarrassing karaoke nights. War zones they grew up in, you run the system. You make the bad parts blur, but today, something goes wrong, you're assigned a high priority case. A rogue fragment. An old woman's memory that keeps growing back, you dive in, digitally, and suddenly, you're on a beach, a real one, blood. Screams. Metal birds overhead, it's Okinawa, 1945, and she's 8 years old. Historical fact, the Battle of Okinawa was one of the bloodiest in the Pacific Theater during World War II, resulting in over 200,000 deaths, including massive civilian casualties. Its legacy remains complex and politically sensitive in Japan. The old woman has remembered this moment every day of her life, and she wants to keep it, but your company says it's harmful. Non-optimizing. You sit there, in her memory, as bombs fall, and she holds her sister's hand, and you whisper, "I won't erase this." You flag the memory as protected, you lose your job, she never knows, but that beach, her beach, remains intact, and in the server logs, your ID is overwritten with one word, Storykeeper. Odd fact, futurists have proposed memory editing as a real possibility in treating trauma, but ethical concerns persist, especially regarding consent, cultural memory, and historical accountability. Academic debate, does forgetting equal healing? Can individual memory be separated from collective truth? Philosophers, neurologists, and archivists continue to wrestle with that question. You don't sleep that night, you just watch the waves inside someone else's mind, and listen to them crash, again and again, like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. And then the tide pulls you under again, not drowning, not frightened, just submerged in the quiet hush of memory. You expect to resurface in another simulation, another era with a scent and a silhouette to anchor you. But this time, there is no immediate landing. Just darkness. Cool, restful, infinite, until you feel grass beneath your fingers. You open your eyes to stars, not artificial constellations, not pixelated light maps, but real stars, brilliant and feral in the open sky. There's a chill in the air, a kind of softness that wraps around you like wool. You sit up, you're in Africa, somewhere high and wide and older than history. The Rift Valley, maybe. Or somewhere that feels like the world just beginning to breathe. You're Homo habilis, not you, the one who wore sandals in Catalhoyukor robes in Baghdad. Not even you, who flagged memories in glass towers. But the first spark of you. The body that doesn't yet know the word memory but already aches with the desire to hold something still. You have a rock, you strike it against another, not to hunt. Not to fight, just to see what sound it makes. This is the beginning of everything. You strike again. And again, and the shape changes. The sound changes. The world, just slightly, bends. You don't know it yet, but this is technology. This is cognition. This is the moment the universe notices you noticing it. A few feet away, a child watches. They copy you, later, their child will copy them, and one day, one of their descendants will paint on a cave wall, not a tree, not a sun, but the curve of a hip, the arc of a bison's back, the shape of a story. They won't have words yet, but they'll have meaning, and somehow, that's more than enough. You rise from the earth slowly, and when you open your eyes again, you're in another body, a woman in Tenochtitlan, just before the conquistadors. You're a record keeper. A painter of codices. You've been trained since childhood to bind histories into bark pages with careful lines and the language of metaphor. You don't write war. You paint two footprints and a shield. You don't write grief. You draw an eye with a drop falling from it, blooming into a flower that withers at the edge. Your codex tells the story of your people. Not just what happened, but what it meant. What it felt like, and today, someone brings you news, ships, white sails. Men with metal skin. Fire that falls from their hands. You don't panic, you sharpen your brush. That night, you begin a new page. The footprints walk toward a jaguar. The flower blooms backward. You don't know how this ends, but you will not let it vanish. You will record even your undoing, the codex will be burned, of course. Most are, but one page, torn and smuggled, survives. It will be carried across oceans, folded into a monk's robe, hidden beneath a plank in a forgotten chapel. Hundreds of years later, a child in Oaxaca will find it. She won't understand all the symbols, but she'll understand the eye, she'll understand the flower, she'll understand the grief. You blink again, and now the air smells of coal and gun oil. You're in a trench, France. 1917, your hands are numb. Not from cold, though it is bitter, but from writing. You've filled every inch of your notebook with letters. To no one. To everyone. To your mother. To your horse. To a girl you kissed once on a rooftop and never saw again. You are 20, you've killed no one, but you've watched boys become bone and mud. You no longer pray for peace, you pray to be remembered, so you write, one night, a mortar hits nearby. You're buried in earth for a moment. You dig yourself out, coughing dirt and shaking, and find that your notebook is gone. You think that's it. All of it. Lost. But a month later, when the war ends for you in a hospital bed, someone walks in holding a battered notebook. Found in a pocket of a dead man next to where you had been. No name. Just the stories. They thought it was his. He's buried with it. Your words. Your ghost. You carry the silence differently after that. You never write again, but you tell stories aloud now. Slowly. Carefully. Like laying bricks. Like digging trenches of a different kind, you build a home from memory, a shelter made of voice. When you rise again, the world is still, snow falls all around you. You're in Siberia, 2023, you're not famous. You're a reindeer herder. You've never used TikTok. You've never seen the inside of a university. But you carry something that scientists, historians, and governments are desperate to preserve, a language. There are only 12 fluent speakers left. And you're one of them. Every morning, you recite a story your grandfather told you. About the mountain that walks at night. About the bird that sings in dreams. About the time the river swallowed a lie and gave back the truth in fish. You don't write any of it down, not because you can't, but because you believe stories must be breathed, not caged. Researchers come. They record you. They thank you, but you worry that someday, someone will play your voice on a speaker in a museum and forget that you were alive when you told it. That the breath mattered more than the phonetics, so you teach your granddaughter, not just the words, but the rhythm, the pauses, the song between the syllables, and one day, in a city you'll never visit, she'll recite that same mountain story on stage. Someone will weep, someone will remember, and the mountain, perhaps, will walk again. The page turns again. Now you're in a tree, yes, literally. You're 13 years old, and you've climbed the tallest tree in your village during a monsoon. Not smart, everyone says. But necessary, you think. Because up here, you can see the water swallowing everything, and you're writing, not on paper, but on your arm, with a bit of charcoal, a map, a warning. You survived the flood. Barely, but you're drawing, your memory of the currents, the paths the water took, the places that sank and the places that stayed dry. That drawing gets copied. Shared. Stored. It becomes part of a disaster preparedness plan. Years later, a scientist quotes it in a report. She doesn't know your name. She assumes it came from a satellite. It didn't. It came from a child in a tree who refused to forget what the sky looked like when it fell. And now, at last, you're still, not in time, not in space. Just. In story, you sit in the center of a spiral, all yourselves around you, the scribe, the potter, the mother, the foot soldier, the boy who hummed in the dirt, the woman who whispered I won't erase this. Each version of you, arms interlinked, humming a song no one ever wrote, but everyone knows. The library rises behind you, the stars are books, the books are breaths, and for the first time, you understand, you've never been alone. every voice you've ever had, every breath you've ever drawn, every tear, every word, every scream, has built something, a cathedral of stories, a galaxy of echoes. You are not the author, you are the chorus. And when you finally step back through the door, into whatever life you're living now, you carry them all. Not as ghosts, not as burdens, but as light, and that, maybe, is enough. Section 12, you sit in the dark, not because there's no light, but because you're waiting. You're in a library, sometime after the end of time, or maybe it's a simulation, or a dream. You're surrounded by shelves that curve like galaxies. Each book whispers. Each one is warm to the touch. They hum, not in words, but in memory, and every book in this place is about life, one life, yours, but not just yours. Each volume contains the story of a life you could have lived, the you who never left home, the you who became a scientist, the you who died in childbirth in a mud hut in 11th century Mali, the you who sailed with Zheng He, the you who hid Jewish children in an Amsterdam attic, the you who walked on Mars, the you who did nothing spectacular, but loved so deeply that time itself paused to watch. You open a book at random, and fall in. Now you're in India, 1948, the day after Gandhi is assassinated. The air is thick. Not just with grief, but with questions. You're a printer again. That seems to be a theme, and someone hands you a leaflet to run through your press. It's not political. It's a poem. It reads, "They killed the man who walked barefoot so we wouldn't kneel." You printed hundreds of copies, then someone sets fire to your shop. You lose everything, except one copy, stuffed into your shirt. You carry it in your pocket for the rest of your life. And every time you touch it, you remember that truth burns, but also survives. Historical fact, after Gandhi's death, India was plunged into mourning, but also violence. Riots broke out. Calls for vengeance echoed. But so did calls for peace, resilience, and memory. Another book. This time, you're in New York, 1969, the night of Stonewall. You're not a leader. You're not even brave. You're just there, a bystander. A busboy. A trans woman in a borrowed dress. A kid from Ohio who hasn't said "I'm gay" aloud yet. Then the bottles start flying, the riot begins, and something in you wakes up. You scream, you run. You write your name on the sidewalk in chalk. You hold a stranger's hand like it's the only solid thing in the world, and for the first time, you feel like you exist. Historical fact, the Stonewall Uprising marked a turning point for LGBTQ rights in the US. While not the beginning of resistance, it became a flashpoint for global movements demanding visibility and dignity. Years later, you hear your child come out to you. You smile, because your history made their history possible, even if they'll never know. One more book. You hesitate, because this one is bound in silence, and as you open it, you realize, you are yourself, now, in your body. In your time. In your moment. Everything you've seen, past, future, imagined, has led back to this breath, this choice, this heartbeat, and the page is blank, because you haven't written this chapter yet. You get to decide how it ends, not with grandeur, not with certainty, but maybe, with kindness, with attention, with a single line that says, "They were here. And they listened." You look up, you're back in the library, and you realize, this is the story you've always been writing, with every word you speak, every time you remember, every time you refuse to forget, because history isn't something that happens to us, it's something we carry, something we build, something we choose, and somewhere. Right now, someone is picking up the thread where you left off, so, you close the book, you shelve it, and walk into the dark, ready to begin again. The darkness doesn't feel like an ending, it feels like a pause, a breath, drawn in, the kind of quiet right before a candle is lit, or right after someone says your name with love. Your feet move. Softly, but with purpose. The library doesn't echo, it receives your footsteps like an old friend who already knows where you're going. Shelves glide open, not because you command them, but because they remember you. Each book you pass seems to exhale gently, like a sleeping animal sensing a presence it trusts. You don't pick a book this time, you let one pick you, it slides out halfway as you walk past. It's bound in blue, deeper than ocean, warmer than sky. There's a faint indentation on its cover. Your thumb fits into it perfectly, you open it, and fall, again, you hit the ground with your hands in the soil, it smells like rain. And memory. You're in the Amazon basin, thousands of years ago, before maps, before names, before borders were anything but rivers. You're part of a tribe that leaves no ruins, no monuments, only trees planted in certain patterns, seeds carried by memory and birdsong. You're a healer, and today, someone is dying, there's no cure in your pouch. No herb that can pull breath back into a chest already halfway empty. So instead, you sit beside them. You hold their hand. You sing, not for them to stay, but so they know the path will be lit when they go. Later, when the others come, they don't ask if you saved them, they ask what they said before they died. You tell them, remember the river when it was blue. That's all, that's everything. Centuries later, when archaeologists find terra preta, the rich, dark soil of the Amazon, laced with charcoal and memory, they won't know your name. But your hands helped shape it. And some part of your song still hums beneath the trees. You turn the page, this time, you're in Hiroshima, not the day of. The day after. You're 17. You've lost your hearing, maybe forever. But somehow, your eyes still work. You see things you can't unsee. People who glow, even as they fall. Trees without leaves. Shadows burned into stone. Silence, thick and screaming. You are handed a broom, no one tells you to mourn. They tell you to clean, so you sweep the ashes, brush after brush. At first, you cry. Then you stop. Then you cry again. You don't remember when the broom became your anchor, but it does. Every movement is a kind of prayer. You press your hands to a piece of fallen roof tile. It's warm, even now. You carve something into it with a nail, a single word, again, then you hide it, not for others. For yourself, decades later, someone will find it in a museum crate. They'll study the script. They'll guess, maybe wrongly, what you meant. But they'll pause. And in that pause, your question will live, another turn, now you're in a desert. The stars blaze above like glass shattered across velvet. You're in a Bedouin tent, translating ancient texts by oil lamp. You don't own much. You don't speak loudly. But every word you trace has passed through centuries of mouths to arrive here, through fires, floods, dynasties and dust. The text you're working on isn't famous, it's not a holy book, it's a lullaby, about a goat who once jumped over the moon and landed in a child's dream. You don't even know if it's real, or just a joke from a scholar 1,000 years ago. But you smile as you write it out in ink, line by line. Somewhere, you think, this made a child laugh. That's enough, you fall asleep beside the scroll. When you wake, you are crying, you don't know why, but the ink on the scroll glows faintly. Like it remembers the laughter. Another chapter, you're on a ship. Cold wind. Vast water, you're one of the enslaved, shackled below decks, body pressed to body, breath like storm clouds. You should not exist. You should not have survived the passage. But you do, you sing. At first, soft. Then louder. Others join. Your voice becomes a rope that ties you to yourself. You don't remember your old name, but the song knows it. And when you step onto land again, chained, sold, stripped, you are still singing. Generations from now, that melody will find its way into a hymn, a protest song, a lullaby, and though no one will know it came from you, when they sing it, your heartbeat will echo in their lungs. Another page, you are a scribe in Timbuktu, the city hums with knowledge, and you are drowning in ink. Manuscripts about astronomy, medicine, love poems, and tax records. You copy each word like a thread in the world's tapestry. But you slip something of your own into the margins. A joke, a sigh, a question, a single line in the middle of a long essay on trade laws. Is anyone reading this, or are we all pretending? Centuries later, a historian will find your note and laugh. They'll think it's a fluke. But it will stay with them. And they'll write about it. And people will read it, and someone, somewhere, will whisper, I see you. Another, now you are old. In your real life. In your real body, you've made mistakes. You've missed things. Hurt people. Been hurt. But you've also danced. Kissed. Fallen asleep to rain tapping on rooftops. Watched someone you love fall asleep reading. Held hands in hospital rooms. Lost your breath laughing over nothing at all. This is your life, not a story in a book, not an echo in someone else's archive, just you, here, breathing, and as you sit on your porch, or your rooftop, or at the end of your bed, you realize, you've lived 1,000 lives, every book you've opened has left ink on your skin, you carry them, the scientist who failed, the warrior who refused to kill, the poet who was never published, the mother who died young. The grandfather who taught his grandchild to dance on one foot, the version of you who never came out, the version of you who never hid, the one who left, the one who stayed. All of them, together, you feel them now, not as shadows, as mirrors, they aren't behind you. They aren't ahead, they are beside you, your chorus, your counsel, and together, you look at the next page, still blank, still trembling, you lift your pen, figurative, literal, emotional, and write the next line. Maybe it's messy, maybe it's small, maybe it's nothing anyone will remember but you, but it's yours, and it matters, because for every grand moment in history, every king crowned, every war ended, there was someone making tea, holding a baby, burying a dog, drawing a heart in the steam on a window. You've been all of them, you are all of them, and the library is still there. Waiting, not to tell you who you are, but to remind you who you've always been, the keeper of lives, the reader of your own soul. You stand, you close the final book, this time, the shelf closes behind you, you don't walk into darkness now, you walk into dawn, not dramatic, just soft, like a page turning, like memory returning home, like a life beginning again. Section 13, the dirt road crunches under your sandals, you're in the kingdom of Aksum, 4th century CE. The sun is merciless. The hills around you shimmer with heat, and you can see the outlines of great stones steely jutting up from the ground like fossilized teeth. You're a courier. That means running. Literally. You carry messages up and down the trade routes from the Red Sea to the Ethiopian highlands. You know every bend in the trail, every cluster of frankincense trees, every well that isn't poisoned by rival tribes, but today, you're carrying something heavier than news, you're carrying a script, more specifically, a new alphabet. The king has decreed that the old South Arabian script won't do anymore. It's time for something local, something that belongs to Aksum alone. Something that can record trade, praise, and the word of God. The priests call it guizi. You just call it scratched thunder, because the letters look like lightning bolts got tired of dancing in the sky and started carving into stone. Historical fact, the guizi script, developed in Aksum, is one of the few indigenous African scripts still in use today, preserved in liturgical contexts in the Ethiopian and Eritrean churches. Aksum was one of the first major empires to convert to Christianity. On your way back from the port city of Adulis, you pass a Roman envoy. He scoffs at your tunic, your bare feet, your lack of Greek. But his scrolls are written in Latin, and your slab is written in guizi. In 100 years, Rome will fall, your script will not. Aksumite coins were among the first in the world to feature crosses, evidence of early Christian adoption. They were widely circulated and even found in India, showing how far the kingdom's influence stretched. At night, you dream of stone rising from earth. Aksum steely reach toward the stars, etched with symbols even you can't read. Maybe, your friend once said, chewing on a date pit, those aren't graves. Maybe they're antennae. For listening. To what, you asked, the past, you laughed then, you're not laughing now, because you've started to hear things, whispers when you press your hand to the stone, stories in the pause between footsteps, echoes that aren't yours, academic debate. Some scholars argue that Aksum was a proto-modern empire, with state-level bureaucracy, coinage, and international diplomacy. Others say it was more loosely organized and relied on merchant alliances. One day, you drop your message slab into a ravine. You're sure it's lost. Centuries later, archaeologists will find it, and they'll read your scratched thunder. They won't know your name. But they'll pronounce your thoughts, and in that moment, you'll be more alive than the emperor who commissioned it, because language doesn't die, it sleeps, and tonight, it stirs. It stirs like wind in buried papyrus, like the hiss of oil on bronze. You wake from a half-sleep in a cave by the trail, the slab heavy on your chest, and you're not sure if you dreamed the whisper or if it was real. The fire beside you spits low embers, and beyond its flicker, the desert night stretches into ink. You curl around the stone like a talisman, like a baby curled around the spine of a parent's story. Because this script, it's not just a message. It's a seed. And tonight, you're the soil, the stars blink overhead, clearer here than anywhere else. There's no roof in the world taller than the heavens above Aksum, no silence deeper than this one. And in that quiet, the letters seem to hum. Not loud. Not even human. Just enough to remind you that you are part of something being born. In the morning, your knees are stiff and your throat dry. You move on. You always move on. The slab goes in your satchel, wrapped in cloth and intention. As the sun crests the ridges, you descend toward the city, toward the rising scent of roasted barley and clay, toward the dusty prayers and shouted markets of Aksum itself. The city is alive the way only crossroads are alive. Oxen clatter beside horses. Foreign tongues mingle with the sing-song cadence of your own. Greek merchants fan themselves with lotus leaves and mutter about taxes. Indian spice traders gesture wildly, complaining about the weight of cinnamon bark. But you pass through it all like a shadow on a deadline. The slab must reach the scriptorium before sundown. You arrive at the cathedral gate, a new building, not even finished. The limestone blocks are etched already with trial inscriptions, test phrases, holy verses, royal declarations. Inside, the air is thick with incense and sweat. A scribe waits, robed and solemn, eyes sharp as obsidian. He doesn't thank you, he never does, but he takes the slab, runs his fingers over the etchings, and nods, just once. It's enough. You limp out, calves tight from the climb, and sit on the edge of a well. A child offers you a date. You take it. Sweetness floods your mouth like forgiveness. Across the square, a monk is teaching a group of children the new letters, drawing them with sticks in the dust. Some of the kids mess up and giggle. One of them gets it perfect and beams like the sun came down to kiss her forehead. You remember when writing meant power only for priests and kings. Now it's spreading. Now it's becoming breath, not just law. You visit your sister before leaving the city. She's tired, always tired, with 3 children and a merchant husband who hasn't returned from Yemen. But she hugs you like the past never happened. You hold your nephew, who gurgles and drools and grabs your ear with pure delight. You whisper a letter in his ear, one of the new ones. Just one. He coos back. Like he understands, the road home is quieter. You avoid the ravine where you dropped your first slab. Not out of fear, but reverence. You've marked it now. Piled stones in a cairn at its edge. Not as a warning. As a promise, you dream again that night, but this time, you're not in the past. You're far in the future, inside a cool museum somewhere. Children with holographic tablets stare at your writing through thick glass. Your scratched thunder glows softly under spotlight beams. A little girl presses her face to the glass. Squinting. Then she reads your name aloud, your real name. No one taught her, she just knew. The next morning, you run faster than you ever have. The trail is soft from last night's rain, and the acacia trees sway like dancers. You don't carry a message today. Just momentum. Just the weight of a language too young to know its own power and too ancient to care about borders. At a small outpost, you meet another courier. He's younger, thinner, and smells like goat. He tells you the king is sending missionaries north, past Egypt. Into lands that don't know your words, your God, or your son. He's excited, you're not. You know what conquest costs, but still, something in you burns with the thought that maybe, just maybe, your letters will go there too. Not as swords. As seeds. By dusk, you arrive at a coastal ridge overlooking the Red Sea. The view makes your bones ache. You remember standing here as a child, holding your father's hand, watching ships like black beetles crawling across the water's skin. He had told you then, everything moves. But words last. At the harbor, an Egyptian trader offers you a scroll in exchange for your sandals. You laugh. Then you give him the sandals. You run barefoot for the next 3 miles, dust blooming around your ankles like applause. You visit a friend in Adulis who works as a stonemason. He's carving a pillar, a short one, meant for a minor noble. But instead of carving his name first, he's writing a proverb. It reads, "The letter outlives the tongue." He grins at you as he chips the final vowel. You sleep that night under a thatched roof, wrapped in woven cloth that smells like salt and citrus. The dreams don't come. Or if they do, they speak a language even you can't parse. The next morning, you find a child waiting outside. She has your satchel. "I want to run too," she says. You don't tell her how many blisters she'll get. You don't warn her that sometimes the message breaks before it arrives. You just teach her the first letter. The one that looks like a hill trying to remember the sky. As she copies it in the dirt, a seagull cries somewhere overhead. In a cave farther down the coast, a priest finishes translating the book of Matthew into Goizi. His fingers tremble as he inks the last character. He doesn't know it yet, but his translation will survive 1,000 years of fire, flood, empire, and forgetting. Aksum will fall. Kingdoms will rise. But the gospel will live on, in lines that trace all the way back to the script you carried through dust and sun. On your final run before the rains, you're caught in a storm. You shelter beneath a collapsed stela, wind howling around its base like an animal trying to wake it. Lightning splits the horizon, and in that flash, for just a second, you swear you see the letters dancing again. Scratched thunder, still restless. Still waiting, you reach your next stop soaked, shoes gone, lips cracked from salt. The scribe looks at you like you're mad. Maybe you are. But your heart is beating the rhythm of the old chants now, the ones before translation, before alphabet, before even sound. A week later, news arrives. The king himself has commissioned a full codex. Bound. Etched. Permanent. You're chosen to carry the first page. It's just a blessing, but it's the first sentence of 1,000 libraries. You run, and behind you, even in the silence, the alphabet stirs again, not sleeping, listening, and falling. Section 14. The air smells like gunpowder and persimmons. You're standing on a hill, just outside the walls of Nanjing, China, in the year 1850. You didn't plan to be here. You were a teacher. A failed one. Your students stopped coming when the crops failed. Then the rebels came. Now you're holding a pike and wearing a red sash across your chest. You're in the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, whether you like it or not. The man who started this rebellion, Hong Xiuquan, claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ. You thought that was a joke, but nobody's laughing anymore. Historical fact, the Taiping Rebellion was one of the deadliest conflicts in history, killing more than 20 million people. Its leader, Hong Xiuquan, believed he was divinely ordained to overthrow the Qing dynasty and establish a new, theocratic kingdom. You've seen cities burn, you've seen children conscripted and elders buried alive for refusing conversion, but you've also seen equality. The women in your unit carry rifles, they fight beside you, pray beside you, they even outrun you in drills. It's chaos, but it's also something else, hope. Even if it's misguided, strange detail is the Taiping heavenly. Kingdom banned opium, foot binding, and slavery. It established communal land ownership and gave women unprecedented social mobility, for a time. You remember a woman named Lin, she used to sing before battle. Not hymns, folk songs from her village, she died during the siege of Suzhou. Her last words weren't scripture, they were, "Tell the hills I'll be back." Historians still argue whether the Taiping Rebellion was a proto-communist revolution, a religious cult, or something else entirely. Its ideology combined Christianity, Confucianism, and apocalyptic vision, sometimes contradicting itself within a single proclamation. You survived the fall of Nanjing, barely. You shave your head, change your name, hide in the mountains. Years pass, the Qing dynasty collapsed anyway, and one day, a school reopens in your village. You walk in, pick up a piece of chalk, and begin again. The students stare at your scars. You tell them, these are from a war over heaven. They don't understand, they won't, but they listen, and maybe that's enough. The wind picks up as you stare at the faces before you, some freckled, some dirt-smeared, all wide-eyed. They don't know what to make of you. To them, you are a ruin in motion, a cracked monument with lungs. You're not the teacher they expected, with your crooked fingers and your haunted silences. But you have stories they can't find in their books. And you don't flinch when the chalk breaks in your hand. You teach them arithmetic, calligraphy, the history of dynasties that rose and fell long before even the rebellion scorched the fields. But every lesson has a shadow behind it. When you talk about irrigation, you remember ditches dug for mass graves. When you recite the classics, you think of the fires that consumed libraries and songbooks, all because someone somewhere decided the old knowledge had to die for the new kingdom to be born. Still, you keep teaching. You keep showing up, even on days when your knees betray you. The little ones help you up without a word. You suspect they think it's part of the lesson. Sometimes, late at night, you hear singing outside your window. Not a melody you know, but the cadence is familiar, rough and rising like a battle hymn from the hills. You go outside once, barefoot and silent, and see a girl with a lantern walking toward the rice paddies, her voice trailing behind her like smoke. She looks like Lin for a moment. Just a moment. Then she's gone. In the spring, a scholar from the city comes to your village. He's writing a book, he says. He wants to know what happened in the south during the Taiping days. He says Taiping like it's a disease. You offer him tea, and he takes it like a man who's never had to bleed for anything. He interviews you for hours. At first you give short answers, yes, no, not sure, but eventually the stories spill out. The scholar writes quickly, nodding along, occasionally interrupting with questions you don't like. Did you believe in Hong's divinity? Was equality real, or just propaganda? Were the executions exaggerated? Eventually, you stop answering. You pour more tea instead. Before he leaves, the scholar asks if he can take your photograph. He has a camera, boxy and strange, with a long neck like a goose. You sit still as he clicks the shutter. A week later, a package arrives, your image, frozen in monochrome. You study the lines in your face, the way your hands rest in your lap like folded paper. You don't look heroic. You look tired. But you recognize yourself. A decade passes, the world keeps changing. Trains scream through valleys now. Foreigners set up consulates in cities you once watched burn. Another rebellion rises and falls. Then another. You stay in your village, teaching, always teaching. Generations cycle through your classroom like the seasons. They outgrow the benches, move away, write you letters. Some never come back, but a few do. One day, a woman arrives with a baby tied to her back and a book in her hand. She's 30, maybe. She thanks you for teaching her father how to read. He told her stories about a teacher who wore scars like medals. She asks if you'll teach her child when he's old enough. You nod. You never ask what side her father fought on. It doesn't matter anymore. Some nights, the hills whisper back. When the moon is thin and cold, you dream of the siege. The sounds of cannon fire, children coughing in tunnels, the prayers echoing in strange tongues. You wake up clutching your chest, expecting to feel blood. Instead, you feel the threadbare fabric of your sleeping robe and the rhythm of your own breath. You sit for a while, staring at the coals and the hearth, until the memory dulls again into silence. Once, during a rare festival, you climb the tallest hill outside the village. It's overgrown now, but you still find the old stone where Lin used to sing. It's cracked. A vine grows through its center like a scar. You sit on it anyway. You hum, just a few bars of one of her songs. Not loud. Not sad, either. Just enough to prove to the sky that someone remembers. Rain falls before you make it back down. You laugh as you slip in the mud, because you're old and the ground is younger than you'll ever be again. Years later, when you can no longer walk without a cane, the village children visit your home to bring tea and listen. You don't talk much anymore. Words are heavy things when you've used them for so long. But you tell one final story. It's about a woman who outran everyone in her unit. Who died shouting at the mountains, not weeping. You don't mention her name. You don't need to. They remember. They've all stood on that hill by now. You pass away in your sleep one winter, under a woven blanket that smells of cedar and ink. The village buries you on the same hill you once defended with a rusted pike and too much hope. They place a stone. It doesn't say, hero, it says, teacher. Years later, when another war comes, and it always does, the children of your students climb that hill and touch the stone. They don't pray. But they remember. That, somehow, is enough, and still, sometimes, late at night, when the wind is right, and the fields are still, there's a voice on the breeze, tell the hills I'll be back, and the hills, wise as ever, do not answer, they wait. Section 15, you're floating, not in space, yet, you're in Germany, 1923, and what's floating is the mark. As in, the German currency. Hyperinflated. Worth less by the hour, you're a typesetter at a small press in Weimar, Berlin. Your job is to arrange the metal letters that print pamphlets, novels, and the occasional anarchist tract. But these days, most of what you print ends up as wallpaper or kindling, yesterday's paycheck. Worth less than a loaf of bread by dinner, you wear a belt made of ration coupons. Your shoes are made from tires. You once saw a man pay for a taxi ride with a violin, not play the violin. Trade it. In 1923, Germany experienced one of the worst hyperinflations in modern history. At its peak, prices doubled every few days. People were paid twice daily so they could spend their wages before they became worthless. The printing presses never stop, you're printing money now. Literal money, stacks and stacks of notes, worthless by the time they dry. You try not to laugh. But sometimes it bubbles out anyway, because what else can you do? Your neighbor uses a wheelbarrow to carry her wages, she's robbed, but the thief dumps the cash and steals the wheelbarrow. The government printed 100 trillion mark notes. Children used them as building blocks. Cafes raised prices between the time customers ordered and the time their food arrived. You remember one night, when a visiting American writer came by, she asked what you printed. You gave her a copy of a banned poem. She cried, said it reminded her of ash. You told her, that's all we have now. Ash and ink. Economists argue over the causes of Weimar hyperinflation. Some blame war reparations, others cite policy missteps or speculative chaos. But everyone agrees, it left scars deep enough to shape the century. Years later, that writer became famous. her memoir sells millions, she thanks an unnamed German printer. That was you. You still have her note, scrawled on a ration card. It reads, "History is hot metal." You handled it with bare hands. You keep printing, even when the presses rust, even when the world forgets, because someone has to remember, and metal letters don't burn. You're floating, not in space, yet, you're in Germany, 1923. And what's floating is the mark. The German currency. It doesn't sink, it evaporates. Worth less with every tick of the second hand. You work as a typesetter in Weimar, Berlin. A quiet craft once, methodical, almost meditative. You arrange metal letters, one by one, into meaning. Now, most of that meaning has turned to fuel, pamphlets become wallpaper. Novels become kindling. The poems you once slid between sheets of fresh paper. Folded into toy boats by children who need something to do while they wait in bread lines. Yesterday's paycheck might buy you a sausage. If you eat it immediately. By evening, that same note won't buy you a crust. You wear ration coupons like jewelry. Your coat is stitched from upholstery scraps. You knew a man who paid for a taxi ride with a violin, and the driver accepted it. Your hands are stained with ink, but not pride. More like disbelief. You used to print ideas. Now you print money. Literal money. Stacks of notes in grotesque denominations. 10 million, 50 billion, 100 trillion. Each time you slide the new bills off the press, you can feel them dying. Like paper butterflies with no wings, only expiration dates. You try not to laugh, but the absurdity curls in your chest like a cough. Sometimes, you think the presses themselves are embarrassed. The streets are full of wheelbarrows and bags bursting with useless wealth. You once saw someone get mugged for their cart, not their currency. The money was dumped in the gutter. The wheelbarrow was priceless. Still, you print. A visiting American woman shows up at your print shop one night. She wears tired shoes and hopeful eyes. She asks what you've got. You hand her a banned poem you kept stashed under a shelf. Something by a dead writer who still feels more alive than the city around you. She reads it in silence. She weeps. She says it reminds her of ash. You nod. That's all we have left, you say. Ash and ink. She leaves. But she writes your name in her journal. Years later, she wins awards. Publishes memoirs. Becomes the kind of voice people quote in classrooms. In the acknowledgments, she thanks an unnamed printer. That's you. She had given you a note, scribbled on the back of a ration card. History is hot metal. You handled it with bare hands. You still have it. Tucked into a pocket sewn into your pillow, you keep printing, even when there's no more ink, even when you're paid in potatoes, not paper, because someone has to remember, and metal letters don't burn. Your neighbor stops by one morning. Her baby is crying. She asks if you can print a story. Not news. Not politics. Just a fairy tale. Anything to read aloud. You print it on the back of expired vouchers. A short tale about a bird who flies backward. To undo its mistakes, you give it to her. She cries, too, and the presses keep humming. One night, the power goes out. The machines fall silent. You feel like a heartbeat just stopped. In the quiet, you light a candle, and start to hand-letter a single poem. One line at a time. Carefully. As if each syllable might vanish if you rush it. A knock at the door. 2 men. One in uniform. They're checking for seditious material. One opens your cabinets. Another flips through your stacks. They find the fairy tale. They pause, read it, say nothing. And walk away. You think it's over. It isn't. Later, the younger man returns. Without his badge. He gives you a folded note. It reads, "My mother read that story. Thank you. Your presses are creaky now. Bolts loosen. Type slurs. You start dreaming of fonts. Serifs fall like leaves in your sleep. You wake with your hands moving, still aligning letters you haven't seen in weeks, then a new order, print flyers. Political slogans. You know what they want. Nothing radical, just loyalty. Unity. Obedience, you hesitate. You delay. You say your rollers are broken. That night, you disassemble the press. Not in anger. In reverence. You hide each piece in a separate wall, you don't know if they'll ever be used again, but someday, someone might find them, and rebuild. You open a bookstore. Second hand. Dusty. You don't sell much. But people linger. They sit on milk crates and read old theater scripts and forgotten manifestos. Sometimes, they whisper lines aloud. As if afraid they'll vanish otherwise, one girl asks for a poem for her birthday. You write her one. Just 5 lines. But she reads it every day. She grows up and becomes a teacher, she tells that story to her students, and they write their own poems. You teach typesetting at night. In a basement. Your students learn slowly. They drop letters. Mix up BS and PS. You tell them that mistakes are proof of effort. You hand out bookmarks that say, even ink becomes gold when it fights to be read. Your presses may be gone, but your words walk through the city now, and sometimes, you hear them echo back to you, from a tram conductor whistling your fairy tale melody, from a child reading aloud to her doll in the market, from an old man, reciting one of your poems at his wife's grave, and you smile, because metal letters don't burn, and memory has never needed permission. Section 16, you wake up to the scent of diesel and dust. You're in Iraq, 2003, and you're an archivist. That wasn't your plan. You were supposed to study architecture. But when the bombs started falling and the statues crumbled, someone had to protect the stories, so you broke into a library. To save it, fire had already claimed the ceiling. Water from burst pipes had turned paper to sludge. But deeper in, beneath the marble, behind a false wall, there were scrolls. Clay tablets. Manuscripts older than languages now spoken. You stuffed what you could into sacks, carried them past looters, past tanks, past history, rewritten in real time. In 2003, the National Library and Archives of Iraq, along with the Iraq Museum, were looted and burned during the U.S. invasion. Countless ancient artifacts and documents were destroyed or stolen, some dating back to Sumerian and Babylonian civilizations. You build a shelter in the ruins, catalog what you can. Sometimes, American soldiers come by and ask if you've seen weapons. You tell them, yes. Knowledge is one. They don't laugh, but a translator does. She becomes your friend. She brings food, a USB stick, and a flashlight. Eventually, she brings hope. Odd fact, some looted Iraqi tablets turned up for sale on eBay and in antique malls across the world, often mislabeled as decorative items. A few were recovered. Most were not. You and the translator digitize everything. Night after night, between air raid sirens, you scan cuneiform tablets with a stolen webcam. Sometimes, you whisper the words aloud. Not because you understand them, but because someone once did. Years pass, you're finally offered a visa. A way out, but you stay, not out of patriotism, out of duty, because in the basement of that broken archive, something hums. It's the past, and it's whispering still. You press your hand against a clay tablet, the grooves feel warm, like the pulse of a language trying to wake up. You trace the markings with your fingers, careful not to press too hard. Each wedge-shaped stroke is a whisper from a world older than empire, older than even the concept of nation. Cuneiform, the world's first script, not invented for poetry or prayers, but for debt. You smile at the irony. Even 5,000 years ago, someone was already keeping receipts. You flip through a fragment written for a grain shipment. You find a lullaby carved onto clay. You find a law that sounds cruel in theory but surprisingly humane in context. You find a list of stars, and with each inscription, you feel less like a rescuer and more like a bridge. like maybe you weren't just saving these things. Maybe they were saving you. The translator, her name is Layla, brings you tea one night. It tastes like cinnamon and earth. She sits cross-legged beside you, watching as you piece together a broken tablet like it's a jigsaw puzzle from hell. You know, she says, they used to believe these were magic. You nod. Maybe they still are. Layla doesn't laugh at you, she just sips her tea and begins to hum, something low, steady, ancient. You ask her where she learned it. She says, my grandmother sang it during blackouts in the Iran-Iraq war. Then she adds, she said it was Sumerian. Or maybe she just made it up. You press record, because even if it's not written down, it belongs here, because memory isn't always carved into stone. Sometimes it lives in the soft space between voice and air. Then comes the flood, not water, people, someone talks, or maybe someone stumbles across your little project. Either way, soldiers arrive. Not American this time. Not Iraqi either, private contractors. Faces covered. Uniforms without flags. They tell you to leave. They tell Layla to shut the power. They tell you that your archive now belongs to someone else. You ask, who? One of them shrugs. A buyer. You feel your stomach drop, because this isn't about protection, it's about profit. You've seen it before. Odd fact, in the early 21st century, looted antiquities became a booming black market industry, with artifacts smuggled into private collections across Europe, Asia, and North America. Some pieces ended up in prestigious museums. Others vanished into vaults. You try to stall, you unplug cables slowly, you pretend the scanner isn't working. Layla knows what you're doing, she does the same, but eventually, they notice. One man raises his rifle, not to shoot. Just to emphasize the silence, Layla stares him down. This is our history. He says nothing, he just walks forward, and kicks over a stack of tablets. The sound they make when they crack is not loud. Not theatrical, it's dull, soft, final. You close your eyes, and feel a scream gather behind your ribs, but you don't let it out, you let it ferment, you let it burn clean, because anger is fuel, and silence is strategy. You wait until they leave with what they can carry, then you dig through the dust and find what they missed, a child's carving, a myth written backwards, a prayer written in Akkadian, too faded for most eyes to see. You hold it like a treasure. You end. Layla start again. Years later, the war ends. A new government takes over, the archive is officially protected. Grants come in. So do graduate students. You're promoted. Layla becomes director. But you both know the truth, the story didn't end when the bombs fell, or when the soldiers left, or when the contracts were signed. The real story is always quieter, more stubborn. It's told by janitors who sweep around display cases, by schoolteachers who bring kids on field trips, by teenagers who scan QR codes beside the artifacts and raise eyebrows when they see who used to own them. One afternoon, a French academic visits. He asks to see the rescued collection. You give him a tour, he nods politely, then he says, so much lost. Yet I wonder if anything truly remains. You pause, you ask him what he means. He shrugs. Context is everything. Without it, even the oldest text is just an object. Detached. Dead. You want to argue, but instead, you open a drawer and pull out one of the few fully intact clay tablets. You hand it to him, read it, you say. He squints. I can't. Exactly, you tell him, context doesn't live in the object. It lives in us. He doesn't respond, but he doesn't call it dead again. One evening, a young girl, maybe 10 years old, walks into the archive with her father. She's fidgety. Bored. You get it. You ask her if she wants to see something no one else has touched in 4,000 years. She perks up. You show her a tiny, palm-sized tablet. It's a recipe. Not for stew, or tea, or incense. It's for beer. She giggles. You both laugh. Then she asks, can I write one too? You pause, Then grab a fresh piece of clay, she presses symbols into it. They're not perfect. They're not ancient, but they're hers, and when she finishes, she hands it to you. You read aloud, "My name is Layla. I like the smell of bread. I want to live forever." You place it beside the tablet from 2100 BCE, because this, too, is a memory worth saving. Decades pass, your hair goes white, Layla retires, you still show up. Every day, you become a myth in your own right, the archive ghost, the intern's whisper, the one who lives in the basement and talks to tablets. You don't correct them, because in a way, they're right. Part of you never left 2003, never stopped carrying sacks of clay through smoke and ruin, but part of you also lives in the now, in the software that makes the cuneiform glow, in the new exhibits, in the poems schoolchildren write in digital Sumerian. One day, someone from the UN visits, they want to interview you. Document your story, you're tired, but you agree. They set up a camera, they ask, "What kept you going all these years?" You think for a long time, then you say, "I wasn't saving history. I was saving people." They tilt their head. You explain, each tablet, each scroll, each prayer, that was someone's moment. Someone's truth. Someone's breath made visible. How could I let that be forgotten? They nod, "Thank you, but you're not done," you add, "and maybe. Maybe I needed them too." You go home, your knees ache, the streets are quieter now, you sit on your balcony, sip bitter coffee, and look at the sky. No drones tonight, just stars. One of them falls, or maybe it's just your eyes playing tricks. Either way, you make a wish, let the next one remember too. And deep in the archive, behind locked doors and layers of dust, a clay tablet hums, still warm, still waiting. So now, let your breath slow, feel the stone letters and worn pages drift backward into silence. We've walked across centuries tonight, you and I. Through ruined empires and fevered dreams. Through alphabets born in fire, coins etched with faith, scrolls hidden beneath rubble, and poems printed in smoke. Maybe you remember the fish-skin sunscreen, the wheelbarrow theft, the girl who sang before battle. Their voices aren't gone, they're just waiting in the pause before sleep. Waiting for someone like you to listen, so let the lights dim a little further, let the hum of fans and faraway trains lull you. Language doesn't die. It sleeps, and tonight, it slept beside you. Have good dreams.